Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. If the game is rigged, change the game.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Game changer, game changer, game changer, game changer. The Game Changer Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Twin America.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. How you doing? Today's Tuesday, March 10th. 69 days into the new year, 296 days left. We are live from the truthfunders.com studios right here, downtown Burbank, California. Truth Funders, do you have a book, an expedition, an invention, or a paranormal documentary you need to get funded? Go to truthfunders.com. Truth Funders, the number one source of backing your project into the fringe. For KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? Oh, yeah. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world. That's right. Protecting our right to freedom of speech. The fact that you are listening to me right now means everything. And I need you to think about that for a second. And if you don't dig it, North Korea is hiring. That's right. www.northkorea.com. I'll pay for the ticket. All right, let's go. Let's go. You want to become a fade or not? Simple. www.faders.org. You got to work a little bit. www.faders.org. It starts there. Come follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. At JChurchRadio. That's where the vetting process begins. You got to come over and grovel a little bit with all the other Fadernauts. Come hang out in the sandbox at JChurchRadio. Hashtag F2B. That's the sandbox. We're going to bust through again tonight. 4,000 tweets. You want to come and hang out? Be part of the show? Interactive? That's what you got to do. And then you got to stand up and you got to wave your arms and say, hey, I'm here. I want to become a Fadernaut. One of us will come and find you. Trust me. That's it. You got to work a little bit. But then you're going to get a secret code. Oh, yeah. You're going to get a secret code. Then you're going to go back to faders.org. You're going to enter that code. And you're going to become a Fadernaut. You want to join the revolution? You want to see what this party is all about? That's all you got to do. It's simple. And it's cool. You want to see something cool, you go to faders.org. You check out that website. You look at the dedication of the fans of this show, the family. Go read their blogs. And when you become a Fadernaut, by the way, you get your own blog page. Yeah, you go there, you get your own blog page. Everything that you've ever wanted to pour out of your soul, you can do it. You can hang out with like-minded people just like yourself. Become a Fadernaut today. www.faders.org. They got the Faders gear over there. I said it last night on the show, and it came out weird. Fader mugs. Fader mugs. Coffee mugs. They're cool. T-shirts, all that stuff. So anyway, go support the show. Become a fader, not today. www.faders.org. All right, Contact in the Desert. I read off 5 names last night, the 5 new winners. They are David M. Lowe of San Rafael, California, Tammy Norton, Florence, Oregon, Wendy Gridley of Planet Earth, somewhere, Michael Schmagitz of Phoenix, Arizona, and Shelley Fuller of the Milky Way Galaxy, and she is definitely a citizen of the Milky Way Galaxy. You are all going to Contact in the Desert. You want to go to Contact in the Desert? Yes, we are giving away tickets. We're going to give away 5 more this Thursday with Michael Tellinger. All you have to do is go to jimmychurchradio.com, www.jimmychurchradio.com. Click on the banner. It's right there. It's easy to see. It's right at the top of the homepage. Contact in the Desert Contest. Click, head over to the Jimmy Church landing page, and enter. You can't win if you don't enter. I don't care how many times you enter. Go and enter. If I didn't call your name yesterday, 2 days ago, if I didn't call your name, then go and enter. Enter again. Win. Come hang out with us. George Norrie, Giorgio Tsoukalos, Eric Von Daniken, Richard Dolan, Linda Moulton Howe, John Anthony West, David Wilcock, Mike Barra, Marshall Klarfeld. This is just off the top of my head. There's 50 speakers there. All the top shelf. Okay, we're going to be broadcasting there Friday, March 29th. That's right. Game Changer, Fade to Black, and KGRA will be broadcasting live. If you've never seen a show like this, broadcast live, now's your chance. You're going to be able to sit. We're going to have about 2, I think we could probably max out that room at about 300 people. Come and hang out. Everybody's going to be there. We're going to have 12, 14 authors and researchers there. Come hang out, watch the show happen, and then, of course, after that, hang out with us. Take some pictures. Come up and meet everybody. Talk to us. Okay? All right? It's cool. Go. Enter. Now. That's an order. Go Beckley Tepe. All right. Yesterday we began our, how do I want to word this right? We began our quest. We started our quest to take over the world with KGRA. Now we have every different way to listen to the show that you could possibly need or want. We have Spreaker. We have TalkStream Live. We have TuneIn. We have KGRA. Now we have, also we have Live 365. We have the podcast. We have YouTube. Soon, iHeartRadio. And over at KGRA, you've got every stream that you would need beyond that. 48K, 96K, 128K, another stream for cell phones. It's all there. You don't want to buffer? Go to KGRA, click. You're going to find a way that suits you best. And I want it easy for everybody, because the best part of this show is when you just get to kick back and listen. You don't want to sweat the small stuff. Okay, so we think we have everything covered. iHeartRadio, but I'm going to say this publicly. iHeartRadio sent me an email yesterday that said, "You are still under review." I was like, man, what is it that they? Wow, what is it? What do they need? I don't know. Oh man, but soon. I know one day it's just going to be bam. We're going to be there, and it's all going to be good. All right, let's get this show cracking. I'm ready. Peter Levenda will be joining us tonight. Peter, one of the best, top shelf, real deal, black label researchers in the world. Peter, if you remember, going back to when he was on this show late last year, and then I took him over to Coast too. So we did 2 shows with Peter back to back. But Peter had been missing. He had been missing for a couple of years. He went deep underground. He went to, I'll ask him tonight, I think what he said, he was like on 4 continents researching. And he went underground. He dropped off on purpose. Well, we chased him down. And last year on Fade to Black was his first time in a couple of, maybe even a few years, that he had done anything in public. And I guess, he came out of the closet, man. He hit the ground running because right after that, we went over to Coast, did another great interview over there. And so when we were plotting out this week, I want this week, all the weeks, all the shows at Fade to Black are special. There's no doubt. We put a lot of effort into that. But looking at this week, I wanted this week to be just correct. Last night, John Anthony West. And tonight, I called Peter. I said, Peter, I need a favor. I really, really, really want you to come over and hang out with the Fadernauts and the KGRA family this week. Will you? He said, yes. Jimmy, I'll stop the train. For you, yes. And so tonight, Peter Levenda will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. And then Thursday night, Michael Tellinger. And that is a week of all weeks. And they're all good. But man, what a week. So with that, let's get this show cracking today. For all the new listeners out there, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near, all of you listeners, the new listeners to the show, when I say let's get this show cracking, that means I'm going to read off my birthday list. And my birthday list is special to me. And we are a family here. And if somebody has made the birthday list, this is for the new listeners, all the Fadernauts, they know what I'm talking about. But if you've made the birthday list, that means you've changed my life somewhere. You've made the list. All right? And it's not just your traditional reading down whatever that is put out by Reuters or USA Today. No, this is a special birthday list. And so today, that's for the new listeners. Okay, why are you doing this, Jimmy? Why? Because if they are on this list, they've affected me. And we have a very special audience. And we all affect each other. And for some reason, when I read off this list, I get it every night on Twitter. Everybody I just love the reaction because we all get it. So with that, let's get this show cracking. Today, guitarist, bassist, musician, Jeff Ament is 52. Oh, you know Jeff, bassist for Pearl Jam, Green River, Mother Love Bone. Dude is a slayer on the bass and a musician. Also today, Carrie Underwood, 32 years old. She makes the list because, quite frankly, she can sing. Also today, Chuck Norris. And I hope you're sitting down. Chuck Norris is 75 years old. 75 years old. Could probably still kick my ass. Gene Simmons' wife, Shannon Tweed, is 58. And today, believe it or not, and I researched this, I got no dead guys' birthdays today. Nobody moved me. A lot of people, yeah, but nobody really moved me today. It felt awkward. It felt funky. And now, as we take our first break, leading in to Peter Levenda, here's our first Twitter question of the night, and you can answer at JChurchRadio, hashtag F2B, your favorite Pearl Jam song. Ooh, that's heavy, isn't it? That's heavy because we all got one that brings us to tears. Your favorite Pearl Jam song. What is it? I'll give you mine right after the break. Tonight, Peter Levenda. Take your calls, 323-825-5045. Tomorrow night, very special Fader night. I might have a surprise. And then Thursday, Michael Tellinger right here live from South Africa on Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black, KGRA, The Planet.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Favorite Pearl Jam song? Mine? I gotta go Jeremy. And Gina pegged it. And what's funny is, Pieces of Lisa. Lisa came in with Jeremy. Wish List hit there quite a few times. Yeah, very good. But they're all good when it comes to Pearl Jam. And they have a way of affecting our very soul. You know, it's just the way it is. The way it is. All right. Tonight, Peter Levenda will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. You can email throughout the show, Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. You can go over to the website. Just go to the contact page where we use non-NSA specially encrypted servers. Very simple. If you have any questions tonight for myself or Peter, hashtag F2BQ. That's F, the number 2, BQ. Fade to black questions. Very simple. All right. That's my tweet deck column. All right. Now, I have to say, K28, you're hired. You're hired back. You can bring your stuff in and your flower pot and put it on your desk because he came back with today, Jimmy, we are Homo sapien Fadernoticus. Yeah. Homo sapien Fadernoticus. I think there's a way we got to get that trending. Got an email from Beth. I got so much. I'm going to read fast. Okay. Got this from Beth. This is about the interview last night with John Anthony West, Jaws. She says, thanks for the great interview with Jaws last night. This is the first time I've heard him, but I'm very familiar with him. Years ago, I read every book the local library had on ancient Egypt, ancient history from the time I was a child, and finally allowed to check out books on the adult floor. Right on. I always felt an affinity for ancient Egypt, and as a young person, I was also fascinated with Akhenaten. More than 50 years ago, I read everything I could find and realized that he had been the first person in that part of the world to worship one God. Yes, this is true. I deduced that this must have been where the Israelites got the idea of one God. I remember explaining this to my mother. I don't think she took my ideas seriously, though. I, too, have the lifelong dream of seeing Egypt. I've looked at every bit of Egyptalia, a word, in every museum I visited. I do the same thing. It's really strange. As one observer said, the work is so beautiful, it makes your heart weep. Thank you for that email, Beth. And now, for all of the news that you know nothing about. Are you ready? Let's go. Buckle the seatbelts. CIA researchers have worked for nearly a decade to break the security protecting Apple phones and tablets. Investigative news site The Intercept reported early today, citing top secret U.S. government or U.S. documents that suggest the U.S. government researchers had created a version of Xcode, Apple's software application development tool, to create surveillance backdoors into programs distributed on Apple's App Store. The latest documents, which covered a period from 2006 to 2013, stopped short of proving whether U.S. intelligence researchers had succeeded in breaking Apple's encryption coding, which secures user data and communications. Efforts to break into Apple products by government security researchers started as early as 2006, a year before Apple introduced its first iPhone, and continued through the launch of the iPad in 2010. Breaching Apple security was part of a top-secret program by the U.S. government, aided by British intelligence researchers, to hack secure communications products, both foreign and domestic, including Google Android. Insanity. I feel a little dirty. I feel a little unclean. But you know what? I'm a PC guy. 1, 2, I don't have an iPhone. I'm an Android guy. And my iPad has been retired. It's a good thing because I typed NSA into that thing about 4,000 times. The Wikimedia Foundation is suing the U.S. National Security Agency for breaching Wikipedia users' privacy with mass surveillance techniques. It said that the aim of the suit is to end the NSA mass surveillance program in order to protect the rights of our users around the world. The group maintains the agency overstepped the limits set by the authority of the 2008 Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It'll file the complaint in conjunction with 8 other organizations, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and will be represented by the American Civil Liberties Union. Wikimedia started batting around the idea of suing the NSA with the ACLU last year following Edward Snowden's disclosures about the scale of the surveillance. It's specifically challenging the upstream spying that taps the internet's backbone and picks up all communications, including those by non-U.S. persons. A homeowner in Indonesia has put her house on the market, and herself with it. The 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in Sleman, a sleepy district near Javanese city of Yogyakarta, comes with a fish pond, a spacious backyard, and a chance to ask the 40-year-old landowner, her name is Weena Leah, for her hand in marriage. The asking price? $76,500. Buyers who don't negotiate the price can ask the owner to marry her. Weena's online ad went viral, prompting local news outlet to track her down and confirm that the offer was genuine. Yes, it's true. Weena is ready to marry a house buyer, as tweeted by Sleeman's unofficial Twitter account. Diane Perna, the realtor who concocted the plan, tells Time magazine that his advertisement is working. Since yesterday, this was as of today, since yesterday, the calls are continuous. They're in the hundreds. And he clarifies that marriage isn't a must. If you just want the house, you can. Soldiers from Chad and Niger launched the largest international push to defeat Nigeria's Islamic extremists whose war has spilled over into neighboring countries. Officials and witnesses said that hundreds of vehicles and soldiers were spotted crossing from Niger into Nigeria. That's right. Loud detonations were signaling heavy combat with Boko Haram. The push marks a sharp escalation by African nations against Boko Haram nearly 6 years after the group began its insurrection. At an African Union summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, on January 31st, African leaders agreed to send 8,750 troops in to fight Boko Haram. The new offensive comes just weeks before elections. The March 28th election was already postponed from February 14th to enable security forces to gain control a wide swath of northeast Nigeria where Boko Haram has roamed freely. That just needs to stop. Mysterious middle-of-the-night drone flights by the U.S. Secret Service during the next several weeks over parts of Washington, D.C., usually off-limits as a strict no-fly zone, are part of a secret testing intended to find ways to interfere with rogue drones or knock them out of the sky. A U.S. official briefed on the plans said the Secret Service was testing drones for law enforcement or protection efforts, and to look for ways such as signal jamming to thwart threats from civilian drones. The drones were being flown between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. The official spoke on condition of anonymity because this person was not authorized to publicly discuss the plans. The Secret Service said details were classified. What do a folk singer, a bar manager, and a NASCAR champion have in common? Are you ready? I want to see Twitter light up. I want to see Twitter light up right now. What do a folk singer, a bar manager, and a NASCAR champion have in common? This isn't a joke. All spent Saturday night dealing with a hack from ISIS. Yeah. The hacker systematically replaced the background images on these and other websites with the black standard flag favored by the terrorist group and added text that read, hacked by the Islamic State, ISIS, we are everywhere. Music that played automatically in a loop was also added to the sites. The song used is from ISIS videos of the Jordanian pilot who was burned to death in a cage after he was taken hostage. The terrorist sympathizing hacker also included a link to a Facebook page under the name of Mohammed Al-Jazari, who also used the alias Muhammad Ali. On Facebook, Al-Ziari claimed responsibility for these hacks and many more, including the University of California, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the Nigerian government. The Facebook page was removed as news of the hack spread, but a Google search links this name to dozens of affected sites. How many sites? He posted an image of 30 pages of affected websites with 25 sites per page. That's 750 websites hacked at one time by one person. Kind of creepy. I'm waiting for JimmyChurchRadio.com. I'm just waiting. A special United Nations team of hazardous asteroids has been dissolved after completing its task of setting up organizations to deal with planet-threatening space rocks. The UN's Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space formally dissolved its Action Team 14 in recognition of the group's successful completion of its mandate to coordinate international mitigation efforts for near-object threats, officials announced. Action Team 14 coordinated the establishment of the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group and the International Asteroid Warning Network. Thank goodness. You know, we don't have to depend on me in the backyard with binoculars because that's about all we had. Dunkin' Donuts has announced its powdered sugar will no longer be infiltrated with titanium dioxide, a whitening agent that also appears in sunscreen, toothpaste, and paint. Dunkin' Donuts will reformulate its powdered sugar following advice from As You Sow, which raised fears regarding the toxicity of titanium dioxide when it ingested as a nanomaterial. Ugh. Can't we just get, I mean, powdered sugar, put it in a coffee grinder, grind it up, turn it into powdered sugar with the little coffee flakes in it. It's delicious. Sprinkle that on the donuts. Why do we have to have, they're doing it to keep the powdered sugar white? How long is the donut sitting on display? Can it sit on display for an hour before it's sold or two without changing color? I don't get it. Titanium dioxide. But actually, there's no evidence that titanium dioxide is even harmful to humans, by the way. The number of people who own guns in the United States has declined dramatically since 1975, but overall sales are increasing as a shrinking number of owners purchase more guns. The number of Americans living in a household with at least one firearm is at the lowest level recorded. That's right. The GSS found that 32% of Americans either own a firearm or live with someone who does, tying the record low that was set in 2010. But it's still the lowest ever. It's just tied with 2010. This marks a significant decline since the 1970s and 1980s, when about half of all Americans had a gun in their household. However, a growing number of firearms are now concentrated in hands of fewer people than there were in the 1980s. And that's it. That's all the news that you know nothing about. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. When I come back after the break, Peter Levenda will be joining us. His new book, The Hitler Legacy. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network. Bespoke radio for the masses. I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. Now on KGRA, The Planet. I'll be back right after this. Do not touch that mouse.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Attention, all Fader Knots. Studio Dome has a special deal on their SD1 Bluetooth speaker. Just go to JimmyChurchRadio.com, click on their banner, enter the promo code Jimmy, and you get $40 off and free shipping on the SD1. It's voice activated, comes with a USB antenna, cables, and a carry bag. Never listen to your phone, tablet, or laptop speakers ever again. It's the only way to listen to Fade to Black. That's JimmyChurchRadio.com, Studio Dome banner, promo code Jimmy, Gobekli Tepe. All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. I just jumped over to TalkStream Live, and right now, I am so upset. We are behind Jerry Doyle, he's cool, Glenn Beck, our friend Clyde Lewis, Mark Levine, and Michael Savage. What do we got to do? But we're ahead of Alex Jones. Ba-dum-bum. That's all that matters, right? All right, this is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Peter Levenda will be joining us. He's in the batter's box. He's actually in hold, in standby mode. I am so excited to have Peter back on with us. I said in the intro of the show, it's a very special week here for us with the syndication of KGRA and the family's expansion so dramatically and fast and fun as it is. But we needed to make this week special. And I've got the short list. And on that short list, my go-to guys, Peter Levenda is on that list. And I called, he was the only one that I called, and I said, Peter, what are you doing Tuesday? And he said, Jimmy, let's do this. He didn't even ask what I was calling about. He's with us tonight. Peter Levenda is the author of Unholy Alliance and Sinister Forces. He appeared in the TNT documentary Faces of Evil in his role as an expert on Nazi history with a special regard to the occult and the esoteric practices. Peter has interviewed Nazis, neo-Nazis, Klansmen, Satanists, self-proclaimed witches and occultists, intelligence agents, clergymen, bogus clergymen, businessmen, military officials, and many more in the course of his research for both Unholy Alliance and Sinister Forces. His new book is The Hitler Legacy, which is an expose of American and European collaboration with the Nazi underground and the subsequent rise of global terrorism. Peter is one of the very, very best researchers in the world. And this May, he'll be speaking at Contact in the Desert, May 29th through the 31st. I would like to welcome back to the program, Peter Levenda. Peter, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. Thanks a lot.
You're invisible, man.
That's the story of my life.
You're invisible, man. You're just invisible. One of the things, Peter, thank you so much. And for the new listeners to the show, I want to say that Peter changed a lot of open minds around the world with his Sinister Forces research and his I want to say this correctly, Peter, so just go with me on this. You know, I don't script anything. His presentations on the subject were so compelling and so well thought out and laid out that it grabbed everybody and pretty much freaked out the known universe. And then, Peter, you went invisible again. You dropped out of sight. And you panicked all of us in our little fringe circles, and we couldn't find you. And somehow last year I did, and you chose. It was kind of weird, Peter, as you know. You chose to surface when I was trying to contact you. When everybody else was contacting you, you were still deep underground and dark. And we were worried, man. You had us freaked out. And then boom, when all those posts started all around the web, where's Peter Levenda, you called me. And I was like, "Where have you been?" You're like, "Hey man, I'm cool." You didn't know. But now you're back. And thank you. And again, you're here with us tonight. Now that I've told that little story, how many continents and where were you and how long were you gone? And did you know that we were sniffing for you under every door, through every window? Did you know that you had friends out there concerned?
I actually didn't know. No, I was totally unaware of it. Most of the time when I am away, I do travel a lot. A lot of it is in Asia. Some of it's in Europe. Sometimes I'm in places where I just don't have regular internet connections, so I'm not really using that time to surf and to find out, who's saying what about whom. I'm lucky to get my email and get in and get out. So I was not aware. I was doing a lot of research. I was talking to people who can be unpleasant, who have unpleasant connections maybe, and so security was a factor in what I was doing. So that's the kind of research I do. I'm not really an armchair researcher as much as I like to, go out where the story is, where the people are, and talk to people and find out what's really going on. So that means that sometimes you're off the grid for a while.
Well, you know what it is now? This is what you have to face, Peter, is now it's the boy who cried wolf. Next time you're going to need us, and we're not going to come looking.
Exactly.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah.
Where were you guys? What? We thought you were in Madagascar. We didn't know. Yeah. No, I was in jail in Haiti.
Again.
All right. Welcome back, Peter. Welcome back. And since I spoke to you last, I think the last time was on Coast to Coast, what have you been doing since then before we start to go knee deep? And, by the way, for all of the new listeners, here's the disclaimer. Peter and I are just going to sit down on my couch. We're going to have a conversation. We have no agenda. There's no sinister forces in play here. We have no agenda. We have nothing prepared. We're just going to start where we start, and we're going to end where we end. We're going to go on a journey tonight. Just snuggle up close to your speaker, fire up a heater, get your coffee or your drink of choice, and get comfortable. And here we go. You ready, Peter? Are you ready?
I sure am.
Okay, so where have you been? What have you been doing for the last few months? Have you been researching? Have you been speaking?
I've been mostly researching. I haven't really been speaking very much. I haven't attended any functions or anything, but I have been deep in the midst of more research. It's more political research. It's more research on paranormal events that maybe have political or military significance, that kind of thing. So it's been deep into research mostly, getting ready to write a few more books. So I've been kind of quiet. But I did attend that meeting out in Phoenix, Arizona, about a week or two ago, one of the MUFON things, just to hang out and see people and see what was going on. So that's about the only public appearance that I've made. And a few people did recognize me, came up and said hello, so that was nice.
Did you see Bob Lazar?
I certainly did. I didn't meet him, but I did sit there. I listened to the presentation that George Knapp was interviewing Bob Lazar. It was a very interesting thing, I have to say. The interview was I mean, we didn't hear anything we really hadn't heard before. I think the value of this type of interview was that it's the same story, and he's sticking to it. And Lazar did a pretty good job of interviewing him using kind of the police interrogation technique of changing subjects in the midstream and then coming back and changing subjects again, which would throw people off if they were dissembling or trying to be deceitful. But then, of course, Lazar has done this for a while. So my takeaway from this was that I think Lazar thinks he's telling the truth if nothing else. I don't think he was. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Peter.
No, go ahead.
What you're saying is generally what I've heard too. I think the consensus is that the point that he was driving home is it really happened. I'm sticking to my guns and don't listen to anybody else but me.
Right.
Right. And he really wanted to make sure that everybody that left, because he hasn't spoken in so long, that if he's going to come out and speak, he really wanted to drive that point home.
And I think he did it very successfully. As I say, he was extremely credible. I mean, I was one of those who was around back in 1989 when he did his newspaper, his TV interviews and stuff. And I thought to myself, well, this sounds just a little too hokey. I wasn't really buying into that story very, very much. And then with the passage of time and this and that, all kinds of other stuff went on. And then he shows up again 20 years later. 25 years later, and he's much more credible now, I'd have to say, than he was at the time. At the time, I thought this whole thing looks like it's staged, a staged event. Like, this is just too weird. How can we believe a story of 9 flying saucers over at Area 51 or S4, actually, or all the alien bodies and all the rest of it? I thought, I don't know, and he's the only one who's come forward with this, and there's no corroborating anything. And even John Alexander, had expressed his doubts about Bob Lazar's story, and that's another whole issue, I guess. But when he came out and said, "I don't think so," then it made me sit back and think, well, maybe he is wrong. Maybe Lazar is making it up, but why?
Well, yeah, exactly. And of course, if you want to dismiss the whole idea of UFOs in Area 51, well, then okay, you can dismiss Bob Lazar. But I have watched everything he's ever done many, 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 many times. And I've tried to allow him to fall on his own sword. And he has never done it, not in my eyes. And trust me, my eyes are squinted. I'm just like, okay, all right. But he's been as credible and well-spoken as anybody could be on this. And I think he's telling the truth. I really do.
Well, I think so, and I have a degree of respect for George Knapp as well, the journalist who interviewed him. I don't think that Knapp would, by any means, willingly get involved in something that was suspicious. I think that Knapp has proven in his career since then that he's been pretty upfront. He's won Emmys, he's won Pulitzer, I think, if not mistaken. He's done a lot of work with a lot of different kinds of stories. Why would he risk his career and his reputation on something that was flimsy? So, he was one of the people who interviewed Corso, in the days, just around the time the book of Last Day, the day after Roswell came out. And Knapp, of course, had his misgivings about Corso. So suddenly this whole Lazar thing started to look more credible. But it's hard, because what Lazar is saying is is really the far reaches of this whole UFO experience.
And when I want to, for everybody listening right now, when you hear that Peter's new book, The Hitler Legacy, is out, and of course we're going to discuss that in depth tonight, but there's a funny situation with you and your research. All of it, just about everything that you do can tie back to, and you have connected the dots to not only the cult of the Nazis, to ufology, all the way back to the very foundation and lore of ufology, all the way through modern history. And your knowledge of ufology is second to none. And I want everybody to understand that there's a strange connection with Peter and all of his research, and how all of this is very strangely connected. And I got to tell, I don't know how. I've said this to you before, Peter. I don't know how you managed to connect these dots, but did your head explode? Did it explode as you started to go, wait a minute, these same names keep popping up over and over again, no matter what subject it is that you're researching? Don't you find that a bit strange?
Well, I find it more than strange. I mean, it's just it strains credulity of any kind. I mean, I'm looking at Warren Commission stuff, and I'm seeing names that came up, where UFO stuff was concerned, or seeing it where some sort of Nazi underground stuff was concerned, and I just going through and finding that everybody seemed to know everybody else at one point in our history, especially during the late 1940s, early 1950s. It seemed that everybody who was anybody were all part of some little clique, some little circle of people who just sort of hung out together and pulled the strings behind the scenes, and that was disturbing. That was it's not a question of my head exploding. There were numerous eruptions over the period of this research. Right. I mean, it was I don't know if there's much left except a crater where my brain used to be, but it's just it's incredible. I mean, who would think, when people talk about a UFO connection, for instance, to the Kennedy assassination, that sounds like tinfoil hat, territory right there.
It sure does.
That's somebody listening to voices in their head. I mean, that sounds like that has got nothing to do with anything. That's like the worst kind of X-Files episode, towards the end of the season when nobody knew what they wanted to write about. And suddenly, I started researching, pulling threads, connecting dots, as you say, and it's uncanny. How could there be such direct and incontrovertible connections between the UFO experience, especially of the late 40s, and the Kennedy assassination? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it shouldn't make any sense, and yet the documents don't lie. These are declassified official government documents. Guy Banister, our favorite FBI agent, our favorite retired, fired, whatever FBI agent, special agent in charge in San Francisco, a SAC in San Francisco, winds up in New Orleans, and he's running an anti-Castro Cuban operation out of his office down there in New Orleans, and he's one of the suspects in a possible Kennedy assassination plot. Okay, that's fine, but I'm going through the declassified files on the FBI's own website of their UFO documents, and all you come across are Guy Banister's telexes back to Hoover talking about the witnesses he's interviewed and the UFO phenomenon that's taking place in the Pacific Northwest. You don't find Guy Banister's documents anyplace else. What you find are his UFO documents.
What's really funny is after your first appearance here on Fade to Black, I got Guy Banister email for about 2 weeks. It just came. I didn't know about that. I heard his name in the movie and Oliver Stone, but after the show with Peter Levenda, I go and I start doing, and it was one email after another coming in, and it was, when people listen to the show, Peter, it's one thing to listen. But most people actually will write stuff down, and when they wake up in the morning, jump on the internet, and start to go off on their own little journey. And that's what they did with Guy Banister. I mean, I'm sure he was trending on Google there for a few days.
I'm sure he was.
Guy Banister. I'll never forget his name. I will never forget the name Guy Banister for as long as I live. But so you're exactly right. And it's not only that, the Guy Banister connection, but how not everybody, but a handful of these guys were all bishops at the church next to your home in the Bronx. They were all bishops, but there were no priests and there was no congregation at this church either. And that Hoover was on the board of advisors for the church. Is that what he was?
That's correct. That's right. Hoover had final say as to who could become a bishop in this particular church. And I have that written down in documentation from some of the other bishops. And I conducted an interview with a bishop who'd passed away a couple of years ago down in Florida, up near Clearwater up there. He was one of the bishops who was very much involved with this. He had a lot of the backstory. I was in communication with bishops out in Colorado who were part of this church back in the old days. We're talking the early 1960s. And they all come back with the same thing. Hoover was essential to this process. If you didn't pass Hoover's muster, you couldn't be a bishop in this church, which means basically the church was a front for FBI activity, obviously. I mean, it was that way when I was there. I was only a 17, 18-year-old kid at the time. But I was able to see a lot of strange people coming in and out, a lot of foreign dignitaries, consular officials from New York, from the United Nations, and the odd FBI agent would come in with their wingtip shoes and their black suits and have closed-door meetings with the guy running the church.
Tefeta. Before we get to Tefeta, this was in the late '60s for you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Now,
68,
which is 20 years after Maury Island, and which is the second UFO event, I think. But all of it was right around the same time as Roswell happened. So
that's right.
During this period, that was 20 years prior. How many of these bishops, this just sounds so funky, how many of these bishops at that church were both involved in Maury Island, Tacoma, Seattle, Washington, and all of the invention of flying saucers, which happened there? How many of those bishops were there, and how many of those bishops were involved in the Kennedy assassination? Help me out, just what do you have an exact number?
No, I don't. I mean, the record keeping was not, foremost in the minds of these guys. I mean, basically, they didn't want any records kept. That was the whole point. They're running intelligence operations, so they're not writing anything down. We know that Fred Krisman, who is the central character in the Maury Island affair, was a bishop in one of these churches. He was a bishop in several of them. I have, for instance, some of the Warren Commission testimony, but also some of the Garrison investigation testimony that goes into some detail about Krisman's background and his interface with the bishops that I'm talking about. So we can use Krisman right off as being one of the so-called religious people who was involved with the UFO incidents right from the very beginning in 1947. Krisman had a background in intelligence during World War II. There's a bit of mystery about Krisman's actual official military record. I don't know why it should still be a mystery at this point, but it is. He claimed to have flown over the hump in Southeast Asia, which means over the Himalayas. He was working probably for the Army Air Force in those days out of Burma or someplace south, perhaps in India. We know that much. Past that, it all gets pretty murky. But Krisman was definitely an intelligence agent at the time, just before the end of World War II. He might have still been doing intelligence work in that interim period between the OSS and the CIA. We don't know that for sure. It looks like it might have been a disinformation campaign that he was involved with at Maury Island. But no matter what, Krisman then, after 1947, he shows up again in 1967, targeted by the Garrison people for Krisman's possible involvement in the Kennedy assassination. So we have Guy Banister in 47, we have Krisman in 47, two guys doing UFO stuff, and then they wind up in being investigated by Jim Garrison because of the Kennedy assassination. That's two so far. Now, if we spin this out a little bit further, you have Guy Banister, And then you have everybody else operating out of his detective's office, so-called, his private detective agency. And that includes David Ferry. It includes Jack Martin. It includes Tommy Lee Baumler. It includes a lot of people. They were all bishops in the same church.
What are the odds?
Well, yeah.
What are the odds? What are the odds? That's all you can say. It sounds too made up. And the next question that I have, it does. It just sounds too made up. Why isn't this a movie? Why isn't this is something that the best of the best screenwriters in Hollywood couldn't come up with this?
Well, that's it. I think the problem is no one can get their head around this. Even Garrison couldn't. I mean, Garrison comes across the name of this church, the American Orthodox Catholic Church, over and over again in his investigations. He doesn't know what it means. Eventually, when the House Subcommittee on Assassinations meets in the 1970s to reopen the case of the assassination conspiracies, Garrison writes them a letter. It's a handwritten letter. I have a copy of it. And he says to them, look, I don't know what to make of all this church stuff. I don't know what to make of all these bishops. There's something going on there, but I can't figure it out. Maybe you guys will have better luck. And of course they didn't. They didn't even bother, I think, scratching the surface of it.
It's an amazing story, and then, but the I want to say the coup d'état. The whole spin on this that really gets it nuts is its cross-continent connections all the way back to Nazi Germany. And then you throw that in the mix, and you throw the 9 in the mix, and you throw NASA into the mix, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in the mix, and von Braun, and the secret space program. Then it gets really nuts. The basic story, the church in the Bronx, JFK, Tacoma, Washington, Maury Island, that's insanity at its best. And then you throw everything else in, and you start connecting those dots, and it just spins completely out of control, and it's a true story.
Well, that's the funny thing. You can speculate like mad about a lot of things, but as you know, and I think some of your listeners know, I depend on the documents. I do some interviews, it's true, but I identify who I talk to. But the documents don't lie, or maybe they do lie. That's the whole point. But there's a whole bunch of documentation on this. This is nothing that anyone is making up. And obviously, at some point in the 1940s, 1950s, I would say, in that era, something really major happened. And we're still reeling from the consequences of it. We're still dealing with the blowback.
Let's take a quick break, Peter. We'll be back right after this. We're going to pick up right where we left off. Peter Levenda. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back with more right after this. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Alternative Talk, KGRA.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. May arrives soon, and with it comes another Contact in the Desert. So join me in Joshua Tree, California, for the 3rd annual Contact in the Desert Conference being held May 29th through the 31st. 2015 brings another awesome lineup of speakers, including publisher of Legendary Times, Giorgio Tsoukalos, New York Times bestselling author David Wilcock, journalist and conspiracy expert Jim Mars, former head of UFO Project for the MOD Nick Pope, investigative reporter Linda Moulton Howe, author and contactee Travis Walton, UFO historian Richard Dolan, and many more. You don't want to miss this. Fade to Black and KGRA will be there broadcasting live May 29th. Just visit contactinthedesert.com for tickets and information. That's contactinthedesert.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Did you ever turn to your radio for your favorite talk show to find that it's been preempted for this?
In the air to deep right center. Back goes Lewis to the wall, and it's out of here!
Or this?
And I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it.
Do you have a favorite talk radio program that's not available in your city? Just go to TalkStreamLive.com for links to the best streaming talk radio shows. At TalkStream Live, you will find live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your favorites are here. With such a large selection, you will also discover some new favorites. On the go and still want to listen? With the mobile smartphone, simply type TalkStream Live on your internet browser. Now you can take internet radio with you. You will also find hundreds of music, news, and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black, KGRA, The Planet, the Game Changer Network, KJCR. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Bespoke Radio for the Masses tonight. Peter Levenda with us for the entire evening. Hey, Peter, I want to take some calls later. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay. A couple of questions that flew into Twitter that I want to address really quick before we take off here. And they're both touching on the same subject. Lynn from Australia says, Jimmy, could you please ask Peter if he thinks UFOs that Bird fought, down in Antarctica were ET Nazi or ET/Nazi collaborative? And then Jeffrey K asked, please ask Peter if he found any evidence of Nazi scientists taking stuff to South America. And I know you get hit with this all the time. And they kind of overlap, if you know what I'm saying. So
sure.
What do you think?
Okay, well, to the first question, the one in Antarctica is extremely compelling. The Nazis, as we know, had a major expedition to Antarctica in 1938. At the same time, they were sending an expedition to Tibet, by the way. So we know that there was extreme interest where they were concerned in Antarctica. Doesn't make a lot of sense. They were getting ready to attack most of Europe. Why they would send an expedition down there is kind of mysterious. And then, of course, we turn around in 46. The war is, the guns are still warm from the war. We've spent a fortune. And then we, the United States, sends down Operation High Jump, which makes no earthly sense at all. Truman tried to get it stopped, as a matter of fact, and the Pentagon, as usual, didn't listen to him. But suddenly you have an American virtual invasion. A convoy goes down to Antarctica, and they carry virtually no scientific measuring equipment, but they do carry a lot of troops. There's something very mysterious about this Antarctica situation between the Nazis and us and what might have been going on down there, especially as Linda Moulton Howe's revelation a couple of weeks ago that she spoke with a man who was down in Antarctica, I believe in the 1950s or 60s, I forget exactly when, but he was down there as part of a scientific expedition and claims that it was the site of UFO activity down there. And that scientists, American scientists, have been sent there to a specific location in Antarctica to investigate something. He doesn't know quite what. And then he saw the scientists when they were retrieved. They all looked very shaken. They all were non-communicative, and they all were sent off to New Zealand somewhere, and that's the last he ever heard of it. So something very strange is going on in Antarctica. I don't know if we're talking about alien spacecraft, we're talking about Nazis, or some combination of the two. But there have been persistent rumors that the Nazis were using Antarctica as some kind of base for future endeavors. I don't know how likely that is. It's a very inhospitable place to operate from. But we have to keep our minds open, because evidently we thought something of it. We sent an entire naval flotilla down there to Antarctica right after the end of the war, when we could ill afford such an elaborate expense. That's one thing. The second part is concerning Nazi equipment or scientific technology going to South America. Well, we know that took place. We know there were notable scientific experts from the Nazi regime who wound up in Argentina. They're practically a cliche, but there they were in Argentina, developing new jet-assisted aircraft, developing different types of space-related activity. Joseph Farrell has written extensively on the Bell and the mystique around the Bell, this type of new propulsion or new alternate energy source that the Nazis were working on. And he's done a lot of research on that. People have been on both sides of that argument, and the arguments for and against are quite strong. But I think that there's an extremely high probability that there was a lot of Nazi technology that wound up in South America. I personally, when I went to Colonia Dignidad in Chile back in '79, I didn't see any high technology when I was there at the colony. I wasn't there long enough. They got rid of me. But later, when the place was raided, they were developing all sorts of stuff at the colony. This is high up in the Andes Mountains in Chile. And they revealed they were working on weapons of mass destruction there.
Wait, stop. What do you mean they got rid of you?
Oh, that story is told in Unholy Alliance, my first book. What happened was I decided to gate crash this place in '79. This was after Pinochet had taken over the country. Allende, who was the democratically elected president, had been overthrown and killed himself or was killed. Pinochet is now taking over. He's turned the place into this extreme right-wing military dictatorship. But I had heard rumors that there was an estate in Chile called Colonia Dignidad, the Colony of Righteousness. And I had read about it in a book by Ladislas Farrago called Aftermath.
Right. That was the colony with the kids and the experiments, right?
Absolutely. That was the place.
That was run by a Nazi.
Yes.
And so let me understand what you just said. You said Pinochet, a crazy dictator that killed anybody that stood in his way for no reason, and now has taken over the country. The country is tipped upside down, and it must have been because it was 30 years ago and you were young and dumb, went and go and crash this place and crash the gate. What did you expect to happen? Did you not fear life at that point? I mean, Peter, come on.
Well, I was 28 years old, so I really wasn't fearing life. I thought I was invulnerable, I just wanted to get down there and to see if the place really existed, to find out something about it, and take a few photographs. That was all I was going to do. I was going to go in and go out. Quick in and quick out. I didn't know what to expect, but I wound up in the town where it's located, a town called Parral. For those of you who are familiar with the map, it's way south of Santiago, the capital of Chile. And I wound up there in the middle of the night. I was stopped, you could say detained, by some local policemen. In those days, the police and the military were the same. There was no distinction. They kept me for a while. We talked, and I told them where I was going, and they warned me against going there, but they couldn't stop me. I got a driver that morning. It was a Sunday morning. We drove up all the way up into the mountains. I got out of the car, took a few photographs, jumped back in the car, and said, okay, let's go. And that's when the gates closed in front of us electronically. Men came out of all over the place. A car parked in front of us. The doors opened. And all these huge people exited from the cars and basically demanded my passport, the film for my camera, and all the rest of it. So they detained me. They asked a lot of questions of the driver. It was just some guy that drove a taxi in the town. They thought I was an Israeli. They thought I was a commando. They thought I was part of a team. All of it was pretty ridiculous. If anybody who had actually seen me at the time, I weighed about 120 pounds, and that's, soaking wet with a couple of bricks in my pocket. So, it was hardly an Israeli commando, but that's what they thought. After a while, they gave me back the passport. They told me I was no longer welcome in the country. They said to leave immediately. I was more than happy to leave immediately.
Yes, you were.
I got right back into town, got back on the bus. Now, you have to understand something. I'm a native New Yorker, so I, at that point had never learned how to drive. So, for me, drivers were people who wore funny hats and, in front of the car, in front of the taxis,
right,
with unpronounceable names. So that's that's what for me driving was. So I took a bus. I was doing this on public transportation, like any good New Yorker. So I'm on the bus going back to Santiago, and the bus has stopped a couple of times on the way back to the capital. The army gets on board. Soldiers get on board the bus. They ask for me by name. They realized I was still on the bus. That was okay. I get back to my hotel, and there's a note waiting for me saying I'm on the next flight out of Santiago, which was not going to New York. It was going to Miami, but,
close
who
enough.
cares?
Yeah, right.
Close enough.
Yeah,
so
right.
I got on that flight, and I was happy to leave. It didn't really hit me what had happened until the flight itself, when I realized that I could have been killed, I could have been detained there. And in the weeks that followed, news had come out about the colony. Jack Anderson famously had covered the story a little bit. And it seemed that it was a center for torture and interrogation of political prisoners. I did not know that at the time. After Pinochet was gone and the new governments raided the place, they found chemical weapons. They found torture, an arrangement that used a remote control torture of prisoners using electronics, where some guy would just sit in a room and torture people in different cells using remote control equipment. The whole thing was bizarre. It was like out of a bad Ludlum novel. And it was very, very scary and very frightening.
Didn't it have an electric fence too?
All of that. It looked like the old pictures you see of the concentration camps with that strange kind of barbed wire that goes up on a kind of a curve outside of the walls. It looked like that. I mean, it still does to a large extent. I've seen some film footage taken a couple of years ago, and it pretty much still looks the same way. They're trying to put a nice face on it. They're trying to make it kind of a German Disneyland. But, it was a safe house for Nazis, people who were there when it was liberated finally. There were a lot of interviews by inmates. Mengele had been there at one point. Hans Ulrich Rudel, the famous Nazi pilot who was part of Odessa, was there. Skorzeny was there. Otto Skorzeny, the famous commando. The place was a major hub, a major nexus in Odessa in the Nazi underground. And it was involved in high technology pursuits and in developing poison gases and all the rest.
And under the guise of a religious shelter for homeless children, right? Kind of like that flavor, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the local people that I spoke with before I got up there, before I made it into the colony, the soldiers I was talking to said that, they run a clinic at the colony that's free 2 days out of the week, and it's our last resort. If we have somebody who's sick, a child who is sick, we'll go up there, take up the child, and then we may never see that child again. So that's how they were homeless children. They were taken from their homes by these people and kept on premises. They interviewed one of these children later, a Chileno boy, a boy who was born and raised in Chile, who no longer knew how to speak Spanish, could speak only German. And that gives you an idea of the amount of brainwashing that took place there.
Oh, man, it's the creepiest of the creepy. With adults, okay, all right. But, when you throw the children factor into this, that whole story about that place, it's just about as creepy and as scary as it gets. And then you start to throw in, Mengele into the picture. It's about as creepy as it gets, Peter. Did it feel that way?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean, when it's a Sunday morning, and picture this, around 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, I'm in a parking lot. I mean, it seems to be a deserted place. I'm just taking a few pictures, figuring these are the first pictures of the colony in captivity, I'm getting back in the car, and then we're surrounded by people wearing lab coats, blue lab coats. I mean, this is like every nightmare out of Marathon Man.
Right. Right.
Is it safe?
Oh, man. All right. Let me jump over here really quick. What about Father Crespy in Ecuador?
Father Crespy in Ecuador? Wow. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah. What do you know about that? This comes from Ed Hake. He's just popped that in, and it's in flow with the conversation.
Yeah, I don't have anything much new to answer, to add to the Crespy situation. I mean, that's sort of come up recently. I know it's been an internet thing for a while. It's kind of weird. If we're talking about the church and we're talking about even the colony, which was a religious organization, it seems to be of a piece. I mean, the man who ran Colonia Dignidad was a child molester, basically. He was a pedophile, the colony that I visited. He left Germany as a minister, as a Baptist minister of some kind. He had been a Luftwaffe officer before, during the war. He left with his congregation from Germany to Chile about 1960 or so. And, was a pedophile and, was not a Catholic priest like a Crespy, but he was some kind of strange Protestant denomination. And, it's all of a piece, kind of. I don't have very much more to add on to the Crespy situation, but maybe next time I'll have more. I'll dig into it a little deeper.
Sure. Okay. When we talk about Nazis, when we talk about the idea of Nazi, when we hear that word, which I always I'm uncomfortable saying it, but when we talk about Nazis, we're not talking about an organization that you sign up for, like the Boy Scouts, and then that's what you do. We're not talking about that. It is more of an ideal, isn't it? It's an idea. It's a thing. It's not necessarily a place.
Yeah, I would say that when we're talking about Nazism, as I've said in my own books, in Unholy Alliance, among other books, it's a cult. It's not a place. When we defeated Germany in World War II, we did not defeat the Nazi Party. There were two different things. We defeated the Wehrmacht, we defeated the German army, but the Nazi Party itself was never defeated. The Nazi Party itself continued to thrive in so many ways around the world. This was an ideology, and it was a very strong ideology with a very recognizable symbol, the swastika, which everybody in the world recognizes. It's something that was a religion, you might say, based on race. It was based on power. It was based on a kind of mythology of masculinity, of the male power dominating over the rest of the world. Women were there to bear children. It was, keep them barefoot and pregnant. It was that kind of an attitude. Women did not have equal say or equal power in that kind of an institution. This was strictly something that was an old throwback to the Vikings, or something very Teutonic. This was an ideal of, manly virtue, which could only be really expressed in war and in violence. The idea was to create a state of total warfare. And that was how the Nazi Party thrived. And there are people, of course, to this day who respond to this very strongly. You throw in some scapegoats, throw in some anti-Semitism, throw in some racism, and you have a perfect storm of emotional ideas and symbols to relate to and to enact in your own life. And this is what's been going on. This is why I've always said that we did not defeat the Nazis. The Nazi Party is an ideology that's gone underground for the most part. It's creeping back out here and there. The underground is a place where things thrive in the darkness and the humidity in the darkness, and they become stronger, they become different. Christianity was underground for 300 years. Christianity looked like it was defeated, at the time that Christ was crucified, and everybody was pushed underground, and the Romans were killing everybody in sight, and there was all sorts of antagonism against the Christians. It was almost 350 years before they were suddenly the state religion, of the empire. So we're looking at the Nazis. Anything can happen. That's why we have to remain extremely vigilant.
Yeah, defeating, when we read this all the time, we hear this all the time, we defeated Nazi Germany. No, right. We didn't. We defeated Germany. Yes. We did not defeat Nazi Germany. And that cult, not only with Operation Paperclip, came this direction. What was the British version of Paperclip? What was it called? Okay. Well, anyway, so Paperclip. But that Nazi cult, that idealism spread around the world, and certainly we're seeing the effect of that now in Syria, Iraq, and it is a non-ending ideal that is, it's the undercurrent of the terrorism that we're seeing to this very day. Well,
it is, and not just in ideological terms. After the war, so many of the Nazi intelligentsia, the main movers and shakers of the Nazi Party, those who were not imprisoned, those who were not executed at Nuremberg, wound up in the Middle East. They wound up, of course, as we all know, in Latin America and in other parts of Africa and in Asia. But so many wound up in the Middle East. Many of them converted to Islam, whether just for convenience sake or whatever it was, but they did. We had Nazi scientists working in Egypt, helping the Egyptians to develop weapons of mass destruction. They were developing some missile systems to use against Israel. We had Nazi soldiers and commandos training the Egyptian commandos and the Egyptian Secret Service. We had Nazis working with Yasser Arafat, the young Yasser Arafat, helping to train him to go back into Palestine to continue to prosecute the war there. So we had the training by people who had been trained by the best, by the SS, who were in North Africa, in the Middle East, helping to train Arab nationalists. We also had Nazi money that was being used to help finance many of these movements. You had Skorzeny, who was in charge of some of the money. You had a Swiss financier called François Guénaud, who was involved with the Nazi bank accounts in Switzerland. He was taking money out to finance various Palestinian and North African liberation movements across the Middle East and North Africa. So we had Nazi money and Nazi ideology working hand in glove with the nascent Arab nationalist movements that were going to go and not only go against Israel, but go against the West in general. That was the idea. The Nazis saw the Soviet Union and America as being, both of them being their enemies. So the idea was to destroy one, then destroy the other, to make room for a new Reich, a new resurgence of the Nazi ideology. And what's happened? We've had the fall of the Soviet Union. We've had Germany become stronger than ever. They're now dominating the European Union. All of these ideas that the Nazis had in 1945, as they saw the war turn against them and as they saw their boundaries being split up and their country being split up, the dreams they had in 45 are being realized now.
Is there tolerance there? But there's still a zero tolerance for anything Nazi in Germany, right? I mean, they just shut that down immediately. They don't allow that, or am I completely wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. They do not allow that. And that's fine. As far as the actual Nazis themselves are concerned, they don't want the publicity. When Willy Brandt, and some of the other leaders of the West Germany at the time, after Germany was divided, when these guys were, developing their new governments, who did they have to use? I mean, the entire country had been part of the Nazi regime. It was a case of total war, as Hitler had designed it, and as Ludendorff before him had designed it. So we have an idea of total war, the whole country engaged in war. So when the war was over, when Germany was divided, and you had the Republic of West Germany, who's going to run the country? Who are going to be the people in positions of power? Who are going to be the industrialists? These are all going to be people who formerly were part of the Nazi regime. So they didn't have to wear swastika armbands or sing the Horst Wessel song. These were true believers. They saw that Germany had been divided, had been betrayed once again, as they had been after World War I, at least from their point of view, and they were going to do what they could to rebuild the country. There was the famous meeting, again, a very controversial subject, but there was a meeting in Strasbourg at the Maison Rouge Hotel, in which, in 1944, the very end of 1944, in which a bunch of industrialists were brought together. They were lectured to by members of the SS and told that you have to expatriate as much of your assets as possible, your technology, key personnel, get them out of Europe, get them to other countries, and wait. You're going to be required to help rebuild the country after the war. But whatever you do, don't let the Allies get hold of your technology, of your assets, whatever industrial machinery or equipment, blueprints, diagrams you can send out of the country, you must do it now. There was a United States government study back in 46, I believe it was, when this was still a major issue. And it discovered that over 750 German companies were located overseas. There were 750 subsidiaries outside of the reach of the Allies of German companies, technology companies, industrial companies, banking institutions. Everything had fled out of Germany, so the Allies could not get their hands around it. And then slowly but surely, this formed the nucleus of what I'm calling Odessa, or the Nazi underground. You had companies with money, with finances, with excellent political connections in all of these countries where they were located, all the industrial might they needed. The story of the bell that Joseph Farrell talks about in Argentina is only one part of a much larger picture of what was really taking place there. You had everybody down in Argentina setting up shop. You had all sorts of money, all sorts of equipment being sent there, all sorts of personnel, engineers and technicians. The same in Middle East, the same in North Africa, the same in Asia, all around the world, and in the United States. There were many German subsidiaries functioning quite openly in the United States after the war.
And as I look at ISIS today, looking back with Saddam Hussein in the late 50s and his rise to power, his vision, and correct me if I'm wrong, but his vision was to model everything after what Hitler represented, not only through his army, but the ideals itself and the command structure.
Absolutely. This was something that was planned way in advance. This was something that the Nazis knew they were going to have to deal with. The how shall I put it? The rational, the pragmatic elements of the Nazi Party, especially of the SS, but also of the Nazi government in general, understood what was happening. They knew that they were going to lose the war. They had already lost World War I. They remember what happened at that point. They were all alive at the time, and now they're going to lose the Second World War. They had to do something to ensure continuity, and basically they ensured continuity of government in their own way, at least government of the party and of what was left of the SS, which was a considerable number of people. A considerable number of SS officers survived the war, didn't even spend that long in jail. Some were mass murderers and only spent a couple of years in prison and got out. These were true believers. When they talked to people back just as 10 years ago, when they talked to Eric Priebke in South America, a notorious war criminal, they interviewed him about the Holocaust. And this is what, puts the joke to the Holocaust deniers. This guy was proud of what he had done in the Holocaust and wished he had completed the job. These were true believers. They're still talking in the 21st century about what they had done 50, 60 years earlier and were proud of it. These were true believers. These are people who were not going to go away quietly. And because of the political networks they developed in the years after the war, because of the financial acumen that they had, the moving of money, laundering it back and forth, the Nazi gold situation was another whole story. They were able to finance themselves and to keep the religion, the ideology alive. And the whole mess in the Middle East right now, tailor-made for people like this. These are people, the people at ISIS, the people at Al-Qaeda, the people in all the other organizations really cut their eye teeth on the Nazi ideology. Anti-Semitism, the Nazis already had been there. Worldwide global conspiracy against Islam, the Nazis had already covered that back in the 40s, 30s and the 40s. They already had all this down. They already knew what they were doing. The blueprint was there since the very beginning. Saddam Hussein didn't have a chance. Nobody actually had a chance. If they weren't playing ball with the Nazi cabal in the Middle East or North Africa, then you were not going to stand a chance. You were up against CIA, but CIA was hand in glove with the Nazi underground. It was Alan Dulles who got some of the Nazis into Egypt because he was afraid that Egypt was going to go communist, was going to kiss up to the Soviet Union. So he wanted the right wing in Egypt to make sure that Egypt stayed outside of the Soviet Union sphere of influence. This was all realpolitik. This was taking place at a very high level. So you had CIA, you had Nazi ideologues, you had Nazi engineers, financiers, and commandos, all as part of this elaborate network around the world.
Are we responsible for a majority of this? I know that we are for ISIS, and we're going to discuss that in a second, but it seems like, and I use this word too often, but we're the progenitor of this. The Nazi Party may have started in Germany, but we allowed it to continue for selfish reasons, for money reasons, the space race, technology. I get that. I understand it. But we just closed our eyes and allowed it to happen. And I don't get it. Are we, because ourselves in the Soviet Union, the Allies, won World War II, but then we allowed the very problems that started World War II to continue. And I don't get it. It's our fault.
Well, it is. It's blowback from everything that we started, not just in World War II, it's blowback from World War I. I always tell people we're still fighting World War I. It's a mistake to look at these as discrete little events that took place in the 20th century. This was all one big event, and it's still going on. Think about this. If you're asking, if it seems unconscionable to believe for 1 second that we might have been responsible for some of this, just think of how the Roman Catholic Church willingly helped Nazi war criminals to escape. To many people in the United States, the Catholic Church and the Pope represented the highest spiritual force on the planet. Many Protestants will not agree with that, but many Catholics, of course, do. They regarded the Pope and the Church as being a high moral, ethical force. And here was the Church enabling, assisting Nazi war criminals. Famous names we're talking about. We're talking about Franz Stangl, we're talking about Mengele, we're talking about Klaus Barbie. Some of the notorious war criminals of the war were enabled to escape with false documentation, false passports, safe houses by the Catholic Church. So you ask yourself, if you're in the United States government and you're in a quandary morally as to what to do, and you see the Catholic Church putting their seal of approval on these guys to escape because they were anti-communist, and because they were Catholic. Hitler, remember, was a Catholic. So was Heinrich Himmler. They were born Catholics anyway. If you look at it from that point of view, then you realize you have moral justification for dealing with this way, for dealing with the Nazis as allies against the communists.
One of the things that always confused me, Peter, is the Nazi Party, SS, no religion, right? That's it. You couldn't have that in your life. But as soon as the war was over, everybody ran to the Vatican to get their papers. It's like they knew what to do, and got their pocket money and were put on a boat and sent overseas. And I'm not incorrect in stating it this way, because that's exactly what happened.
Well, it is. I mean, the SS forbade any mention of Catholic rituals, Catholic holidays, ceremonies in its documents.
Christian, Catholic, anything.
Anything.
Right.
Christmas was outlawed, literally outlawed. Easter was outlawed. Baptism was outlawed. All of these concepts were outlawed. They could not be done. You could not be an SS officer and continue to go to church, receive communion, or do anything like that. That was forbidden. They had replacement ceremonies. So they had a ceremony for a baptism, you might say, a kind of christening. They had their own wedding ceremonies. They had their own holidays. They celebrated the winter solstice because that was a pagan holiday that was acceptable. But nothing Christian, naturally nothing Jewish, nothing Catholic, none of that was allowed. The SS was a pagan organization. Himmler's ideal of it was to create a kind of a pagan Vatican at Wewelsburg Castle, where I filmed something about 10, 15 years ago, where the Nazis would meet, Himmler would meet with his 12 of his disciples. They would sit around this table and commune with the Teutonic spirits or something. That was okay. But Christianity, no. Christianity was the enemy. And then suddenly after the war, they're all being baptized, they're all becoming Catholics, and they're all taking Vatican passports and leaving. And the church had no problem with that. You know, that's the impossible thing. The church said, this is fine, this is okay, because these guys are anti-communists. And, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So according to the church, as far as they were concerned, this was great. Franco in Spain, another fascist dictator, was a pious Catholic. You know, Juan Perón in Argentina, fascist supporter of Nazis, was a pious Catholic. This idea of Catholicism and fascism being somehow allied against communism was very powerful in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
So eliminating religion while the Nazi Party rose to power, was that for control of the masses?
Oh, sure. They created their own church. They created a German Christian church, actually, which was run by the party. So if you were still Christian, you were a German. They realized they couldn't make everybody pagan overnight. They'd had to sort of slide them into it. So they rewrote the Bible, literally. I'm not making this up. They rewrote the Bible to take out all the references to Jews, which meant you had about 3 pages left, I guess.
Right.
So there's the Bible, no references to Jews. Jesus was not Jewish, according to this new ideology. So Jesus was an Aryan.
They tore it in half, like the Old Testament. That's right out, right? And
pretty much, yeah. And Jesus was an Aryan. Jesus was the son of a Roman soldier, and therefore he was an Aryan, according to this story. So they made up their own church. I mean, all this stuff was going on. There were plans to eradicate Christianity completely from German culture. That was the end game.
Where are these Bibles today? Have you ever seen one? The rewritten Nazi Bible?
I have seen one. I don't own one. I've seen them in Germany. People still hold them. They still exist. Few and far between, but they're there.
Do they burn your hands when you pick them up?
Oh, I try not to touch them myself.
Yeah, right. Catch on fire.
Yeah, I wear gloves usually.
Yes.
I don't want to leave any prints either. You know what I mean?
Struck by lightning.
Struck by lightning, yeah.
Edgardo Santiago just tweeted, he said, Peter, is there truth Hitler once wrote that he was compelled by voices to escape explosions impacted during World War I?
He claimed that he was guided by a kind of providence or destiny that saved him, because he did manage to escape by the skin of his teeth several explosions. He was once in the bunkers during World War I and left the bunker just a moment before a bomb hit and killed everyone else in that trench. So he believed that he was protected and guided by destiny. This much is true. And of course, there's the persistent rumor that, of course, that Hitler escaped after the war. Something that I wrote about in Ratline, which goes to another whole story. I don't know if we have time for that, but Hitler. There's a lot of evidence that Hitler could have escaped. The Father Crespy story brought that back to my mind when your listener brought that up.
Right.
There's the idea that Crespy might have been Hitler, but there's also a lot of rumors that Hitler did escape. There's actually no forensic evidence to prove that he died in the bunker. There's nothing. There's only the eyewitness testimony of the SS, and they all disagree with each other depending upon whose prisoner they were, the Soviets, the British, or the Americans. So the stories are all different. Nothing is the same. Hitler either shot himself, was poisoned, was strangled, et cetera, et cetera. There's no consensus reality on this at all. And there's no evidence that Eva Braun died either. All the information that we have about that was hoaxed. It was mistaken identity. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that just didn't add up in the end. So the persistence of Hitler is another problem for the Reich, for people who are afraid of the resurgence of the Nazi Party, because this idea that there is no Hitler body anywhere, that Hitler might have escaped, is only going to lend itself to more a mystification where Hitler is concerned.
We have DNA evidence, don't we, left over from Hitler? Certainly. Don't we have stuff?
Actually, the only evidence we have right now is from members of Hitler's own family. And they're not being very cooperative as far as giving DNA samples to be used to test other samples that may come by.
We don't have hair from the bunker. We don't have like old underwear with Chief Brown streak left in the underwear. We don't have anything.
We got nothing. I'm serious. We have nothing.
Toothbrushes. I mean, he probably never brushed his teeth.
Nothing. He didn't have very many teeth at the end. Yeah. No, right. Nothing.
Interesting.
Nothing.
That's interesting. Okay, real quick, back to putting this stuff together about ideology and the Nazi way of life that has never gone away. Of course, with Paperclip, and we're going to come back to that. But dealing with the Middle East right now, is there, as you are doing your research and writing things down and putting your pins in the wall, and I know how you work, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood. Of course, we have Libya, we have Syria and Iraq as the obvious things. Jordan is a possibility now. We have Lebanon. Are we looking at direct connections with all of this? Are you putting these pieces together?
Well, okay, we look at this from this point of view. We made a series of drastic errors during World War I and right after World War I. When I say we, I don't mean the United States yet, but the British and the French, certainly. They screwed up. They promised the moon to everyone. They promised the Arabs they would have their freedom, they'd be liberated. They promised the Jews they would have a homeland in Palestine. They promised everybody everything, just in order to get the war won, to get rid of the Turks, to destroy, the Turkish control over the Suez Canal. All of this was being promised. They promised the moon to everyone. This was the problem. So eventually people got betrayed. And in the end, what happened was there were two major factions in what is now Saudi Arabia. There was Prince Faisal, and we remember him from the movie T.E. of Lawrence of Arabia. He was the man who was being backed by T.E. Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Prince Faisal, his family, the Hashemites, were in charge of Mecca and Medina. Then you had a guy called Ibn Saud. Now, Saud was a Wahhabi. Saud was a fanatic Islamic activist. He had another whole set of tribes that was loyal to him. He cut a deal as well with the British. So we have Faisal cutting a deal and we have Saud cutting a deal. What happened was Faisal got kicked out, essentially, because there was another deal that was being signed between the British and the French, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This essentially divided up the entire Middle East arbitrarily between the British and the French. They basically, without exaggeration, took a ruler on the map of the Middle East and started drawing lines. And the people who drew these lines was T.E. Lawrence, on one hand, and Gertrude Bell, a famous female archaeologist and explorer, on the other. And they sat there, they put their heads together, and they just basically divided up the Middle East between the British and the French. They put in the boundaries that exist today. Arabia was not given to Prince Faisal, even though he was supposed to control the area. He wound up in Damascus, then he wound up later as king of Iraq, a country where they didn't know who the hell he was. And then Saud takes over Arabia, and today you've got Saudi Arabia. It's named after this guy, a Wahhabi, a fanatic. The British let the fanatic in charge of Arabia, in charge of the oil. Faisal, whom they think they couldn't really work with as well, basically got the short end of the stick, and Saud, the fanatic, is now in charge of all the oil in Saudi Arabia. This is the beginning of the problem. Now, none of the tribes in the Middle East, they're all Muslims. We all know they're all Muslims for the most part, but they didn't agree with each other. They didn't like each other. They hated each other. They were constantly killing each other. We couldn't leave that alone, right? So what we did is we kind of forced alliances and allegiances between people who basically hated each other. We forced the situation that we have today. If we had let it alone, everything would have been fine. But we couldn't leave it alone. The British and the French got in there. They betrayed everyone. And guess what? In the middle of all of this, there's going to be Palestine. There's going to be the state of Israel. So if you're an Arab, young Arab man on the street in Jerusalem, let's say in 1919 or 1920, and you've heard all the stories about the protocols of the elders of Zion, the idea that there's a worldwide Jewish conspiracy to take over the world.
Right.
It's going to be between the bankers and everybody else.
Right.
If you grew up listening to that, suddenly it became the reality.
Right. and what didn't come into play yet in 1919, nobody had the craziest of ideas was certainly not that oil would come into play like it did yet. The money wasn't there. It was still sand. And we looked at it as that entire region as uneducated, backwards, sword-carrying, camel riding, and I'm not saying that in any type of racist way, but that's the way we looked at the Middle East. And we just thought that we could manhandle its direction every step of the way. And that obviously turned out not to be the case.
Well, yeah, exactly. We had our own ideas about all of this, and what we did not expect was going to happen was that there was going to be a guy called the Emir al-Husseini, and he was a Palestinian. He was a Muslim, kind of dropped out of college, but wound up making himself the religious leader of Palestine, what they call the Grand Mufti. Here was a guy, blue-eyed, sort of fair-haired, Aryan-looking guy, nonetheless scion of one of the major families in Palestine.
Can I stop you right there for a second?
Sure.
I need everybody to listen very, very closely. Now, Peter and I are about to tie this entire show together with this next paragraph. Okay, Peter, I'm serious. For people, most people don't know this part of the story and the problems that we have in the Middle East, Saddam Hussein, everything today, ISIS, United States, Nazis, World War II, this entire situation that we're in right now, it's all going to come together. I want everybody to listen. Okay, Peter, run. Fly a mission, man. Drop a bomb. Let's go.
All right. Al-Husseini as I said, drop out of university, Al-Azhar University in Cairo. He fought with the Ottoman Turks during World War I. Of course, that thing was lost. As I said, a blue-eyed, fair-haired man, charismatic, discovers that Palestine has been taken basically by the European powers, by the British and the French, and they're going to create a Jewish homeland in the middle of where he grew up. So now all of a sudden, he's on the warpath. Al-Husseini then becomes the leader of the Palestine Liberation Movement. And he not only becomes the leader of it, he basically becomes the leader of the violence that was associated with the Palestine Liberation Movement in Palestine. He makes up stories about the Jews are trying to control everything. We have to fight against the Jews, fight against the British. He hated everybody. The British, on their side, were not that keen on what was known as the Balfour Declaration, which was going to give Palestine to the Jews. So the British kind of sat out a lot of the riots that took place, seeing maybe the Arabs would win, the Jews would win. They didn't know, they didn't care, but they kind of sided with the Arabs. They were hoping the Arabs would win and this whole Jewish thing would go out because it didn't make any sense since there were not that many Jews in Palestine to begin with. Al-Husseini is at the middle of this thing. He's inciting riots. He's making sure that people know that there is this worldwide Jewish conspiracy to control the whole world, and that in order to fight back, they have to take arms against the British, arms against the French, et cetera, et cetera. This is 1920s now, going into the 1930s. The Palestine riots are taking place in the late 1920s. The place is a mess. And what happens? Hitler is the elected chancellor, or named chancellor of Germany. This was a dream come true for Al-Husseini. Al-Husseini then starts to look at Hitler as the answer to a virgin's prayers, because Hitler is anti-Semitic. Hitler is anti-colonial. He hates the British and the French as much as Al-Husseini does. The whole Nazi thing fits with what Al-Husseini wants to do. He goes to Germany. He talks to Himmler. Eventually, he talks to Hitler. He has his picture taken with the Fuhrer. And the whole idea is, listen, we're going to help you fight against the British and the French in the Middle East. We're going to raise up the armies. We're going to get rid of the British and French. We're going to pave the way so you can take over the Suez Canal. Everything's going to be hunky-dory because all of our people hate the British and the French as much as you do. So they are raising armies. They raised an entire SS division. This was the Bosnian SS division, the Handschar division, which was run by imams, religious leaders, Muslim religious leaders. There's photographs of Al-Husseini blessing these troops during World War II, making radio broadcasts from Berlin to his people in Palestine and the Middle East, and basically telling them that there's a jihad underway against the British and the French, just as there was in World War I. Now there's a new jihad, and Al-Husseini is leading the charge. So here's a man who brought together in himself all of these disparate ways and channels that we've been talking about: Nazi, Islamic terrorism, extremism. Al-Husseini was part of the whole Salafi movement, basically a Wahhabi. He was a person who was an extremist, took an extreme interpretation of Islam. So he kind of was a part of the whole thing, part of the whole new wave that we saw entering the Middle East since World War I. Al-Husseini was in the forefront of this.
And this is what was key at that moment too. He was a good-looking guy. He was well-dressed, well-spoken. He made himself a leader in their eyes. They needed that at that moment, the entire Middle East. And now he is welcomed as a virtual head of state into Berlin. Yes. And it showed everybody in the Middle East, hey, this guy is legit. He's walking lockstep with Hitler, and now he is forming an army. We have uniforms, all of that, which was important. And they really, really looked up. He was key at that moment. And when I say he was good, he was a sharp dress. He was exactly what you need to represent. And he was one of the first, he's dropping jihad, and everything was perfect. It was a perfect storm at that moment for Al-Husseini. And when like I said, he was an accepted head of state, and that was his stamp of approval and legitimacy for the entire movement in the Middle East at that moment.
That's exactly right. He was, and he remained that way. Even after the war was lost, al-Husseini remained a major figure, a major player in the ideas of Arab nationalism, Palestinian liberation, and all of that. Al-Husseini, I think, didn't die until the late 1970s. This guy kept up the work all that time. He was at every important meeting of the Muslim Brotherhood, of various other terrorist organizations and nationalist organizations. Everybody knew who al-Husseini was. He was also the man who was the bag man. If they needed money to get funneled to one or the other of a movement, if the Nazis were trying to finance somebody to overthrow another government somewhere, al-Husseini was able to do that. Of course, he took a few percent off the top. You had somebody like al-Husseini involved in the non-aligned nations movement. This was a movement in the 1950s where people like Sukarno of Indonesia and some of the other leaders of the Arab world and Africa decided they did not want to be part of any kind of polar arrangement between the United States and the Soviet Union. So a lot of countries in South America, in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia decided that would form their own bloc, their own political and economic bloc, and al-Husseini was part of that as well. So there was this idea, once again, as the Nazi ideal was to get rid of both the United States and the Soviet Union, and al-Husseini was one of the figures who kept promoting that concept, that third way, as they call it, the third way concept, right through World War II and all the way through until the moment he died. He was an important figure in this. He was an important figurehead. Everybody respected al-Husseini because basically everything he predicted had come true, especially where this idea of a global conspiracy was concerned. It was very easy to make that case to people in Palestine who saw basically their land being invaded by Europeans. Europeans first, Jews second. I mean, these were Jews from Europe. So they saw Germans and Austrians and Poles and Russians and Romanians and Hungarians, all these people coming into Palestine and claiming that land. And this looked like a global conspiracy to a lot of people on the street who were getting their news only from one source, and that was al-Husseini's radio broadcasts and his newspaper articles.
How important was al-Husseini to Saddam Hussein?
Well, important enough because Saddam Hussein was part of the people who fell under al-Husseini's spell. Hussein also believed in a great deal of what al-Husseini was talking about. The difference was that Saddam Hussein himself was more secular than he was religious. He was looking at al-Husseini's movement as a political liberation movement more than some kind of religious jihad type of an operation. Saddam Hussein was not that interested in the religious aspects of this, but only in the political ones. He had been defeated a couple of times in Iraq. He had had problems. His father was involved in revolutionary movements and all of this, but it was Muslim Brotherhood, al-Husseini, some of the Salafi and Wahhabi movements that were behind some of the liberation movements. But once Saddam Hussein got into power, it was a cult of personality around Saddam Hussein. Suddenly his religious ideology was not quite that important anymore. But by that time, Hussein was already, al-Husseini was already out of the picture.
Now that we've created this problem that we have in the Middle East,
oh yeah,
what is the end game to this? You know, one of the things that just sickens me is that, you know, I'm watching ISIS drive around in our Humvees, you know, yeah. and I see this. It is certainly how can we be so dumb? But we allow it. It's just like we saw all of this unfolding 2 years ago. We knew that we would be in this. We would find ourselves in this position today. What do we do? I mean, what are the answers here?
Well, I think from my point of view, and just based on my research, and it's my opinion, I think what we have to do is stop playing their game. And we're playing their game by insisting that ISIS represents Islam, that there's a religious war or a culture war between us and the Muslim countries. This is really not so. If we look back at the history of what happened in the last 100 years, we will immediately recognize that although you can call all of these people Muslims based on their religion, they basically all hate each other. There's tribal conflicts that are going on throughout the region. This is a tribal conflict that's taking place right now. This is not a unified ideological movement the way we think it is. This is power politics, pure and simple. So if we understand, we take religion out of it for a second and look very pragmatically, we have to do what basically the people in that region do. And that is we make deals based on the convenience of the moment. And we'll break deals based on the convenience of the moment because that's how it's done there. That's how it's played there. I've done business around the world for almost 30 years, I suppose. I've been in international trade for a long time, which means I've dealt in business in Asia, Europe, Latin America, everywhere. Everybody has their own way of doing business. It's not always the American way, but it works. In terms of politics, we have to realize that as well. The political situation right now in the Middle East and North Africa is not a purely religious conflict. These are conflicts that are much older than what we believe it is. These are conflicts that are tribal. I mean, the amount of problems that we had in order to get the Arab tribes together long enough to get rid of the Turks were insurmountable. These were people who spoke the same language, had the same religion, had basically the same culture, the same backgrounds. They still hated each other. They had grudges going back generations, as we witnessed in Yugoslavia when that country broke up. There was no such country as Kuwait until after World War I. There was no such country as Iraq. These countries are imaginary. They're virtual countries. And they're populated by people who basically hate each other. Shia, Sunni, Kurds, the Yazidis. There's the Alawis in Syria. They're not even exactly Muslims as far as most Muslims are concerned. And yet Assad in Syria is a member of this particular cult. And that's what it is. It's a cult. It's an Islamic-style cult. The Druze militia in Lebanon, they're not Muslims either. But we paint all of these people with one color, and we think we're going to deal with a religious warfare. And that is a big mistake. These are people who have political differences, ethnic rivalries, linguistic differences. They're incredible. We're uniting them by calling them all by the same name. We are making the mistake of uniting them against us.
With, we go in, we invade Iraq, we destroy their infrastructure, we tear their military apart and all of their internal security. And so we're dealing with that part. We shouldn't have invaded to begin with. Why? Because, Saddam and the people there dealt with their own issues. And the country, as much as we may not have liked Saddam Hussein, the country functioned.
Yes, as Yugoslavia did under Tito.
Right.
The countries did function. We hate their political systems. We hate the cultural ideas on which they're based. We hate, for instance, the suppression of women and women's rights as one good example. All of these things we despise. But what do they have now? They have death and destruction. That was the alternative that we offered them. We have got to step back from this a little bit and reevaluate our position and reevaluate our strategy. We've got to stop calling this conflict a conflict with Islam, because it really isn't. We are empowering ISIS by saying that ISIS represents Islam. That's exactly how they want to be perceived by the rest of as representing Islam. If we keep saying that they do, then we're giving them more power. We have to stop that. And we can't stop it by somebody going and saying, well, Islam is a religion of peace. ISIS doesn't represent that. That's not enough. We have to show it. We have to demonstrate that we understand the differences.
I think we lost you, Peter. And actually, I'll bring you right back. We were getting ready to take. Are you there? Okay.
I am.
Okay, yep. You're here. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're talking with Peter Levenda. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Talking about our problem in the Middle East with ISIS and the conflicts there, but the definite ties all the way back to Nazi Germany. I'll be back right after this. Do not touch that mouse. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
Are you a paranormal investigator, ghost hunter, or UFO skywatcher? If so, FNGinnovations.com has the product you definitely need in your investigations kit or go bag. Introducing the Morpholite Wide Beam Tactical Flashlights that put the light where you need it most. Traditional flashlights shine a focused round beam with limited line of sight in the dark. Morpholite Tactical Flashlights change all that, utilizing a revolutionary wide beam design to enable you to see safety hazards such as hanging wires and steel, pipes, and holes in the floor you just can't see with a focused round beam. In the field, where safety is paramount, a 180-degree beam increases orientation and peripheral vision in the dark. Morpholite flashlights are ideal for investigations in abandoned facilities such as houses and hospitals, factories, caves, and tunnels. Avoid those low-hanging tree branches that poke your eyes in the woods. Visit FNGinnovations.com to see a full line of tactical lights and accessories. Ministries. That's fnginnovations.com.
Now you can find all your favorite talk radio shows live, all in one place at TalkStreamLive.com. Listen from anywhere, office, home, or in your car. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com and click on one of the many live talk show hosts you want to listen to. It's free and easy. No computer? Download the smartphone apps. Never miss your favorite talk show. Find them all at TalkStreamLive.com.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. KGRA, the Planet Game Changer Network, and my microphone, my cough button keeps shorting out. Talking with Peter Levenda. Peter, follow us, by the way, on Twitter at JChurchRadio. We've got a bunch of questions lined up. Hashtag F2BQ. Just follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Simple questions, anything you want, you can email Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Peter, are you on Twitter?
No, I am not.
You know, I hear, Peter, I'm going to give you a tip. I hear Twitter's going to be big.
I've been resolutely avoiding a lot of social media for security reasons, if nothing else. When you're doing Nazis and terrorists and everything else, being on Twitter is not always a good idea. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Now, back to ISIS. Here we have this catch-22, and this is the catch-22. Morally, we have an obligation. We went in and bombed them back to the Stone Age. I'm talking about Iraq. Went in and just absolutely took out their infrastructure, everything. I cannot imagine one day living in Iraq and then the next day, 5 days later, the United States military is at the gates of Baghdad. That is crazy what we did. And leading up, the air campaign leading up to that, just absolutely bombed them into submission. And now, today, when we take away all of their internal security, all of those Nazi generals that ran the Iraqi army, all of those guys are now running free. They're angry, and they're going to organize something, and they did. And today it's called ISIS. So now this moral obligation that I think that we have to go in and straighten out the problem, there's that. And the catch-22 is maybe we need to back off and let them fight their own battles with this, even though we created it, because we don't know how to deal with it. And today it looks like Iran is now assisting. After how many years did they fight Iraq? 8, right? How long was that war? And now Iran has come to Iraq's rescue for ISIS because they know how to deal with this on a cultural level.
Well, exactly. They've been dealing with this for 100 years at least. They've been dealing with this kind of problem between Iran and Iraq. Iraq was an artificially created country, as I mentioned. I mean, it's the old Mesopotamia, but including a lot of extra territory, including Kurdish territory, and it's largely a Shia population, which is the same religious denomination of Islam as Iran, and yet it was being run by Sunnis, right? So you talk about the Sunni triangle in the middle of Baghdad because it was basically a minority. The Shia were in the majority. Most of that region probably should have been Iranian in the first place. They were not ethnically the same, but they were religiously the same. So you have that issue to deal with. So there's a lot of identification of a lot of Iraqis with some of the Iranian forces. Then you have Iran, of course, supporting Hezbollah and Hamas and all of this. So you have a very, very strange situation. We go into this situation, we're going to cut a deal with Iran, let's say, where ISIS is concerned, or where Iraq is concerned. But then we have to worry about the fact that Iran is also dealing with Hezbollah and Hamas and maybe developing nuclear weapons. We want everything to be black and white. As Americans, we like things cut and dried. We like things easy to understand, good guys, bad guys, white hats, black hats. In the Middle East, there's no such thing. It's all gray hats. I mean, sometimes they're on your side. Sometimes you can morally support them. And the next day you can't because they've cut a deal with one of your enemies. This is the way of life in that part of the world. It's just not going to change because we say it should change. So we've got to step back a little bit. We've got to reformulate a policy, and especially a policy that's not going to change every time there's an election. We need a stated U.S. foreign policy, which is not going to be that changeable. People can rely upon what we say from one administration to the next. That's also very important. So we're dealing with people in a part of the world who are very paranoid, who don't believe anything, who think everything is a conspiracy theory, and then we get involved supporting one side against the other, and the fallout from that is a whole bunch of other conspiracy theories are created. A lot of people start hating us even more. People who liked us before hate us again. The thing is a mess, okay? It's an absolute mess. We all know it's a mess, but a military solution to this is not going to win us any favors. It's not going to be a real solution. It's only going to be a temporary one.
Now, I can't speak for Iran. I can't. I've never been there. I don't know. I don't know what it's like in the streets there. I don't have a clue. But certainly when we go back and we look at the pictures of life in Iran before the Shah came to before Khomeini came to power, with the Shah of Iran, with the glamorous life that was going on there, it was very much. It was like the 51st state of the United States, completely propped up, and it looked like it wasn't going to change, and it changed overnight. And we didn't understand what the culture was there. Now, they've been stable. Yeah, they have. They've been stable ever since. I don't know what goes on there today, but it's something that we don't understand. And we just, as much as we may want to get involved, we have to back up and just let them, I'm talking about all of the Middle East, do their own thing, because it's been going on there for millennia. And they get it. We don't. We are completely... That's where it's black and white for us, Peter.
Yeah, well, we're being used by all sides in this conflict. We're being used because we are naive. We're being used to prosecute one point of view against another, one agenda. We don't know what these agendas are. I'd like just to make at this point a shout out to all those former agents who were sidelined and fired after the admiral took over in the 1970s, all the guys at CIA who had on-the-ground experience when everybody fell in love with SIGINT, with signals intelligence, with electronic intelligence, and they decided we didn't need spies on the ground anymore. That turned out not to be a pretty good idea, didn't it? We thought we could do everything with satellites and computers, right?
Yeah, oh, man.
In the words of Dr. Phil, how's that working out for you?
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We needed people on the ground. We needed people there.
Jack just tweeted, I want you to address this really quick.
Sure.
He said, all the countries were made up there, but you didn't say anything about Israel.
Well, I did.
Oh, no, well, okay. So like I said, let's just address, it was all made up, including
especially Israel, of course.
Especially Israel, exactly.
Yes. These are all invented countries. I mean, Israel, of course, claims, I don't want to get into this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but Israel's, of course, their claim is that, of course, according to the Bible, that's their territory. But, that's just not enough, right? It's not enough to create a country to say that there's this book, which some people, atheists, would consider a book of fairy tales, saying that this land is theirs. But they use that as the justification for taking over that territory, saying it was theirs. Now, there's a lot of historical controversy over this, a lot of political fighting and all the rest of it. But one thing is for sure, before World War I, there was no state of Israel. In fact, before World War II, there was no state of Israel. It only came into existence after the end of World War II. So yes, Israel, Iraq, Kuwait, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all invented countries, all created after World War I as puppets of colonial regimes. And that's really what happened. And we're still paying that price, as I say.
Help me out in my world history. What about Libya?
Libya was taken over for a long time by the Italians, just as Egypt was taken over for a long time by the British. In World War I, Egypt was British territory and Libya was Italian territory. Of course, when World War I was over, the British cut up the Middle East and Libya became independent, quote unquote, after a while. So then it became its own country. It became arbitrarily, a line went down between Egypt and Libya, and they said, okay, this is Egypt over here, and this is Libya over there. And then, of course, you had Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, all those French occupied colonies. So we're talking about colonies. We're talking about colonies all over the world. In World War I, it was a German who came up with the idea of global jihad. There was no such thing as global jihad until a German came up with the idea. Thank you very much. And that was Max von Oppenheim. He was an amateur archaeologist who had the ear of the Kaiser. He believed himself to be an expert on the Middle East. And he told the Kaiser, listen, convince the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to declare a jihad in the entire world to fight against all the colonial powers, and they'll rise up and help Germany defeat Britain, France, and Russia. That was the idea. And the Sultan went along with it. And he declared the first ever in history global jihad. Jihad is a thing where Muslims are encouraged to fight spiritually, to have the struggle internally, but also to fight against those who would attack Islam, who would invade an Islamic country, kill Islamic people. You're supposed to rise to their defense. The idea of a global jihad, brand new, something that was invented in the 20th century by a German for political expediency. This is the weaponization of religion. And this is something that we're seeing the blowback, as I say, once again, religion being used as a weapon against us. This weaponization of religion was a Western concept. Let's use Islam, the idea of jihad, to fight against our enemies. First, the Germans used it in World War I, and then we used it in the Cold War. In the Cold War, Eisenhower, there's Oval Office transcripts of Eisenhower saying, why can't we have a holy war? Why can't the Muslims have a holy war against the Soviet Union?
Jack just said your answer sounded like the CIA.
Well.
I can assure you that Peter Levenda is the opposite.
Yeah, but don't tell the CIA that. I could be in a lot of trouble.
That's one thing I would like to address. I've never asked you this. You've been there. You've got your dissenters. You've got your naysayers out there,
Sure.
and that say that you're a disinfo guy, that
Sure.
you're feeding us disinfo, that you're an agent. You're on the payroll. I just want your comment. What do you laugh when you hear that, or how do you deal with it?
Well, in the first case, I sure wish I was on the payroll, I can tell you. But in the second case, disinformation. The problem with that argument is that you ignore that when I write about something in my books, I give you the documents. I tell you where to find the information. If I was a disinformation agent, you'd think that I'd make stuff up, right? But in this case, I'm actually saying, here's the documents. They exist. Go yourself and find them. You'll find them where I say they are. I began that practice with Unholy Alliance, where I told everybody where to find the microfilm rolls about the Nazi documents. And I've done it in Sinister Forces and all the books since then. So how am I disinforming if I'm telling you stuff that's really out there that anyone could find for themselves if they had the time?
I have a question here from Renee, and this is a little bit of a segue, but I'm looking at the studio clock here, and I don't want to run out of time, and I want to get this in because I find this interesting. She says she'd be very interested to hear Peter talk to us tonight about the unusual discoveries he made in Java while researching his book, Tantric Temples, as well as any unusual experiences he may have had while there.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is a bit of a, yeah. Okay, sure. I have spent a lot of time out there. Beautiful country. It is, for instance, the largest Muslim country in the world. For those who are not aware of that, there's over 220 million Muslims living in one country in Indonesia, which is larger than most of the Middle Eastern countries combined in terms of population. They're most dead set against terrorism and all that kind of ISIS stuff, and they will tell you that anytime you ask them. But generally speaking, Java is a country that's fascinating, the island of Java, because it's a melting place of Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic, and native religious practices. So they're all sort of mixed in together there. And I did have some unusual experiences there, as I mentioned in Tantric Temples. There were times when my cameras would mysteriously malfunction and suddenly function again, especially taking pictures of certain symbols. As my camera would pan over a temple, it would seriously distort. The recordings would distort, and the camera would turn itself off. I'd have to reinsert batteries, turn the thing on to get it working again, and it was fine. This happened on more than one occasion, so it was not just a coincidence or just some faulty problem with the camera. There was something strange going on. To this day, I don't know what it is. But Java is a very interesting place. I recommend people to go. I think you talked about Java, really, before the program started, before this interview started. You talked about a woman who's selling her house and herself.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I know that town. Sleman is really just a suburb of Yogyakarta, where I stay most of the time. I find it unusual that she's including herself with the house. That's normally not done, I can tell you. But yeah, that's the part of the world I'm talking about. It's a very unusual place. It's not what you'd expect from a Muslim country, a country that has a mosque on virtually every street corner. It's a completely different experience.
Now, I just wanted to get that in for her really quick.
Sure.
Hold on. I just need to back up. I should have been a little bit more on top of this. There was a name that somebody wanted me to ask you about. It was Herzl.
Theodor Herzl?
Yes.
Theodor?
Yes.
The head of the Zionist movement.
Yes.
What specifically were they asking about?
It's literally all caps. Ask him about Herzl.
Well, boys and girls.
Yes, exactly.
Old Teddy Herzl was the guy who basically jump-started the whole Zionist movement, the Zionist organization, out of, I believe, Switzerland, where they had their first Zionist Congress, and that was Herzl. Herzl was the founding father of the movement to create Zionism, and was a bit of a socialist, as I recall. The idea of the kibbutz in Israel was a kind of a socialist idea. Everybody gets together, they all work for the common good. It's community-owned property, communal-owned land, and all of that, and Herzl was part of that. And of course, it was Herzl who was involved in all the deals that were being cut in the Middle East to guarantee that the Allies would win World War I against the Axis powers. So I don't know much more. Herzl's a whole biography there. I don't think we have time to go into all of Herzl, but in a nutshell, that's Herzl.
Everything ties together in your life.
It does.
Everything just ties together. It must
be.
It does. It's easy for you. I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you about the address book. How did you discover it, Rudel's address book, and when you did, what did you find? What was in it?
Well, this is something that I think people should know about the book, The Hitler Legacy, because this is the only place you're going to find this anywhere. By accident, I believe, Hans Ulrich Rudel's address book was included in a declassified CIA file on Josef Mengele. Now, Hans Ulrich Rudel was Hitler's favorite ace. He was an ace pilot. I think he was credited with more than 80 kills during World War II. He lost a leg in that conflict, so he walked with a cane or with a limp. Hans Ulrich Rudel was this dashing aviator who was denazified, quote unquote, after the end of the war, but then who later became one of the primary movers of the Odessa underground. He was their star. He was the guy who could go and raise money. He was the guy who kept them ideologically pure. He was the person everybody wanted to shake hands with was Rudel. He and Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite commando, were the two leaders, the CEOs, you might say, of the Odessa underground, the Nazi underground. So it was a surprise to me to see that someone had included Rudel's address book. And it's pages and pages and pages of handwritten names, addresses, and phone numbers of people in Rudel's circle, the people that he knew. And we find in there, for instance, Klaus Barbie's address in Bolivia when he was still living under the name Klaus Altmann. We find a lot of information about Mengele's contacts. We find huge numbers of people in Paraguay and Argentina, politicians, industrial leaders, all people that were friends of Hans Ulrich Rudel. It is virtually an introduction to the Nazi underground, to the people that he knew, that he worked with, including people in the United States and including people who are still alive today, which is why I was surprised to see that this address book was declassified without realizing that, I guess the people didn't realize that these people, many of whom are still alive, and probably a little upset that I published the address book. I've called a few of them. I've contacted a few of the living people. One of whom was a very nice guy who had worked with Rudel when he was working for the Defense Department, the United States Defense Department, coming up with new designs for aircraft. It was suggested that Rudel would be a great person to talk to because he was a pilot, he was an aviator. He understood how planes worked, what modifications should be made to make better planes, and Rudel was more than happy to work with members of our government in coming up with new aircraft designs. So there's a whole history of the Nazi involvement, not only in the underground, but also even, as it turns out, with members of our own government.
You get Rudel's address book and you start calling numbers.
Yeah. What else? I mean, sure.
What? That's exactly what I would have done. What period was the address book from? What years? I mean, was this the 70s, the 60s? Is it?
It was 60s, 70s, and into the 80s.
And the phone numbers are still good.
In some cases, the phone numbers were not good, but the address and names were good, and I found the phone numbers based on that.
No kidding.
Yep.
Okay. You got to name names. Who did you call first? Who picked up the phone first?
I'll tell you in a second here. A man called Spry. I wonder if he's listening right now. I gave him some credit in the book. And no, I didn't put him in the index. But Spry was a man who worked for our government. In fact, there were two aircraft engineers who worked for our government who were friends of our Mr. Rudel. And I am looking to see if I find his name here. And I could tell you right away. Yes, Pierre Spry. Pierre Spry lives in Glendale, Maryland. Hello, Glendale.
Wow.
Pierre Spry, aircraft designer and defense analyst, and a producer of jazz records, who was one of the small team that created the F-16 and the A-10. Fluent in German, he interviewed Hans-Ulrich Rudel as part of his research concerning optimum design criteria for jet fighters. He answered the phone. I had a very nice conversation with the guy.
Shut up.
Nope.
And how did that go? It was a nice conversation. Did you... Oh, tell me. What?
Well, I mean, he found Rudel to be very helpful, a very charming guy. From his point of view, Rudel had not been a Nazi before the war. He had been a pilot. He was a dedicated pilot. He was just an airplane jockey. That's really what he wanted to do. But it was his experience after the war. It was experience being denazified. It was hearing Germany being maligned. It was hearing him being accused of all sorts of things that basically made him into a Nazi. He became more of a Nazi after the war than he was before, according to Mr. Spray. So this is an interesting development, an interesting kind of a concept that Rudel might have been, not the Nazi we always thought he was. He was just a pilot who did his thing. He shot down other enemy aircraft. That's what he was ordered to do. He was in the Luftwaffe. Like a lot of people in the German army, in the Wehrmacht, they were not Nazis. They were not dedicated, followers of Hitler, but they were there to defend their country. And Rudel was one of these until, he was denazified, and the denazification process made him a Nazi, according to Spray.
Who else did you call?
Oh, a few odds and ends, people who are not returning my calls. I don't think I'll mention them on the air.
Okay.
But you know who you are in Providence, Rhode Island, and in Cranston, you know who you are. And why don't you return my calls? So, a number of people still in the United States, some in Chicago, some in, as I say, in New England, and Spray was in Maryland. And there's another pilot close to Spray. I won't mention his name because he hasn't returned my call either. But he's also still alive and also worked with Spray and with Rudel.
And you found their phone numbers. The numbers did ring. They just didn't pick up.
Yeah, they didn't pick up, or there was voicemail, and I left voicemail, which was never returned.
You are insane, Peter. Do you sleep with one eye open? I've asked you that so many times. Tell me, do you sleep with one eye open? And what's your security system like at the pad?
As if I would tell you that over the open.
Oh man. Okay. Let's back up a little bit. When we talk about, I want a clear definition of two things here, because we talk about it all the time. We talk about the Nazi Party, and then we talk about the SS. How easy was it to become a Nazi Party member, and is that the same as becoming a member of the SS?
Okay, it was relatively easy to become a Nazi Party member. There wasn't a lot demanded of you to do that. They wanted to have people who were devoted to the Nazi ideals taking an oath to Germany and to the Fuhrer. But to become an SS Party member, you were part of the elite in that case. You had to undergo a rigorous investigation of your background. They had to make sure you were racially pure. The people, again, who are Holocaust deniers, who say it never happened, blah, 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 they have to go back to the rules for becoming a member of the SS. And to become a member of the SS, to become an SS officer, you had to prove purity of blood, quote unquote, going back to the year 1750, which means you had to provide documentation showing there was no Jewish blood in your background in order to be part of the SS. That was absolutely a requirement. Then, of course, you had to be take an oath to the Fuhrer. You had to be physically fit. You couldn't have any deformities, handicaps, mental, physical, or anything else. You had to be a perfect specimen, quote unquote, in order to be part of the SS, which is pretty funny considering Heinrich Himmler, but you know.
Right.
So you had to follow this, and you were initiated. I mean, there were initiation ceremonies, there were candlelit processions, there were all sorts of weird stuff going on. In my first book on Holy Alliance, there's a photograph of a candlelit procession that was undertaken on the summer solstice. And you have all these blonde guys, you know, basically in loincloths, holding torches. It was like a bad gladiator movie, you know. And they're all gathered together in the forest, and you think it must be Germany, and it turns out it's Argentina in the 1930s. So this was really a cult, and it was worldwide. So you had Nazi Party operations even in Indonesia, since you brought up Indonesia, or your listener did. There was an extensive Nazi Party organization network in Indonesia, which was the Dutch East Indies at the time. So you had Nazi Party movements everywhere, and it was cult-like. And to be part of the SS was to be part of the priesthood of the Nazi Party. These were actually the elite. There were the rituals that took place at Himmler's castle and Wewelsburg, which is near Paderborn in Germany. This was a very important site. It was never completely finished, but he had used it on occasion. They were going to initiate SS officers at that site. It was built, renovated using concentration camp labor. So there was this idea that the SS was pagan. It was totally anti-Christian, totally anti-Jewish. The only religion allowed was the pagan religion as they saw it. They were recreating a pagan religion. They didn't know what the pagan religion of Germany really was. They only had some evidence, but they were recreating it as they went along. And they had some real psychos who were involved in this work, by the way. They had a group called the Ahnenerbe, the SS Ahnenerbe, which is the Ancestral Heritage Research Division of the SS. And these were people who went and studied runes. They studied yoga. They studied Asian religions, Eastern religions. They looked at archaeology, anthropology, all these various disciplines, and tried to come up with what the real German pagan religion would be. Part of the one of the people running this thing was a guy called Weistor, I should say. His real name was Willy Gut, and he was a former mental patient who was given a commission in the SS, and he claimed that he could actually remember all of his past lives going back for thousands of years, that he had eidetic memory of his past lives, and therefore could help recreate the original German religion. This is the kind of stuff that was going on.
Now, with the enrollment list, the checklist to get into the SS so long and difficult, it wasn't easy.
No.
When we look at von Braun, he was a major in the SS. Am I correct?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
If he's a major in the SS, he can't claim innocence here.
Absolutely not.
Because, and we're going to follow up, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to follow up with this when we come back, because you can't, it's a difficult process to go through. It's not forced upon you. It's voluntary. He wanted to do it. He went through the application process because that's what he wanted to do. And when he came over here through Operation Paperclip, he just didn't wash his hands of the SS.
No, I don't think he ever did. To be a major in the SS, this is not like joining the Rotary Club or something.
That's right. Let's take a quick break, Peter. We got to follow up on this when we come back. This is Fade to Black. We're talking with the one and only Peter Levenda. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. I'll be back right after this. More with Peter Levenda in just a second.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Attention, all Fader Knots. Studio Dome has a special deal on their SD1 Bluetooth speaker. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on their banner, enter the promo code Jimmy, and you get $40 off and free shipping on the SD1. It's voice activated, comes with a USB antenna, cables, and a carry bag. Never listen to your phone, tablet, or laptop speakers ever again. It's the only way to listen to Fade to Black. That's jimmychurchradio.com, Studio Dome banner, promo code Jimmy. Go Beckley Teppy.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. May arrives soon, and with it comes another Contact in the Desert. So join me in Joshua Tree, California, for the 3rd annual Contact in the Desert Conference being held May 29th through the 31st. 2015 brings another awesome lineup of speakers, including publisher of Legendary Times, Giorgio Tsoukalos, New York Times bestselling author David Wilcock, journalist and conspiracy expert Jim Mars, former head of UFO Project for the MOD Nick Pope, investigative reporter Linda Moulton Howe, author and contactee Travis Walton, UFO historian Richard Dolan, and many more. You don't want to miss this. Fade to Black and KGRA will be there broadcasting live May 29th. Just visit contactinthedesert.com for tickets and information. That's contactinthedesert.com.
This is KJCR at jimmychurchradio.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Tonight, Peter Levenda. Wow. Broad stroke of the pen tonight with Peter, as always. KGRA, The Planet, Game Changer Network. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter @jchurchradio. Don't forget, Contact in the Desert. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Get in on the action. You're not going to win anything if you don't go and enter the contest. Go now, jimmychurchradio.com. All right, Peter, you still with us?
Sure am.
Man, can you hear that? Can you hear that? Is that going out live over the air?
What is that?
Okay, good. You can't hear it. It's something bizarre is going on with one of my feeds. Okay, all right. Anyway, doesn't matter. Now, with Operation Paperclip, and we're bringing over what was, dozens, then hundreds, and then ultimately probably thousands of scientists and stuff from Germany over to here. What was the ratio of SS versus Nazi?
I would say that the number of SS we brought over was relatively small in terms of the overall number of people that we eventually took in under Paperclip, which is why someone like von Braun or Dornberger, his boss, kind of stand out for that reason. These were real SS people. There were others; those were not the only ones. But I would say out of maybe the numbers now are very controversial. At least 1,000 people were brought over under Paperclip, as it turns out now. I would say over those thousands people, maybe 100 or more, maybe a good 10% were SS. The ones who we brought, when I say we, I mean Dulles and the CIA, brought over to Egypt was a higher percentage, I think, of SS that wound up helping Nasser develop rocket systems there and to train his troops. And then, of course, the number of SS who wound up in South America was huge. But you're only talking about Paperclip. I would like to bring up one other group of SS we brought over. An entire SS division, including their families, was brought over from Ukraine at the end of the war to the United States.
Who were they?
Well, this was an SS division. These were Ukrainians who were fighting against Russia, because Russia was communist and had taken over Ukraine. They were fighting for Ukraine nationalism, so they were fighting on the side of the Nazis. So they created an entire division for them, an SS division, which was basically Nazi Ukrainians fighting against Russia. When the war was over, this was a very tricky situation. You had Ukrainians who were then going to be slaughtered by the Soviets because they had betrayed, Soviet Union. They were fighting against the Russians on behalf of the Nazis. So what do you do with them? Basically, somebody somewhere made the brilliant decision, well, let's bring them all over to the United States.
How many?
We're talking entire divisions. We're talking more than 1,000 soldiers, plus their families. We're talking thousands of people.
You're scaring the crap out of me. What happened next?
Well, a lot of these people wound up in extreme right-wing political movements in the United States. The Ukrainians, of course, were very prominent in the anti-communist movements here. They were prominent in the World Anti-Communist League, the WACL, that comes up occasionally. Reagan was very partial to them. You had groups that were ethnic captive nations, refugees, you might say, who were all very pro-Nazi. The Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, ROCOR as it's known, ROCOR, was the Tsarist Russian Orthodox Church that fled at the end of the revolution. These were very pro-Nazi. They believed in that the Nazis would deliver Russia from communism and deliver Ukraine from communism. So they became very much involved in the American political mainstream of these people. George de Mohrenschildt. We've heard a lot about George de Mohrenschildt the last couple of weeks because Bill O'Reilly claimed he was outside the door when de Mohrenschildt shot himself.
That's right.
George de Mohrenschildt was a very important person in the Kennedy assassination investigation. He was a friend of Lee Harvey Oswald. He was a member somehow of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. He was part of that clique down in Dallas of white emigre Russians. And he was a friend of Lee Harvey Oswald, introduced Lee Harvey Oswald to Ruth Paine, and the rest is history. De Mohrenschildt did commit suicide or was killed one way or the other. The crime scene was very strange.
And that was in Miami, right? I think so. I think that happened in Miami. He wasn't in Dallas.
No. He wasn't in Dallas for sure.
Yeah, I think he was in Miami. O'Reilly was in Dallas.
Yes.
When the suicide happened, and he claimed that he was actually at the front door. I believe it was Miami, but continue.
Yeah, it was the East Coast, no matter what. I mean, he was out here somewhere. And he was going to be interviewed by Gaetan Fonzi, who was an investigator for the House Subcommittee on Assassinations. And just before he was supposed to meet him is when he allegedly committed suicide. So this is George de Mohrenschildt, and he was part of the ethnic Russian anti-communist movement, at least that's as far as we can tell. So this was something that was pervasive in U.S. society. The church that I mentioned, we talked about at the very beginning, the American Orthodox Church, Orthodox Catholic Church, was a creature of the Ukrainian nationalist movement. The founder of that church was a guy called Walter Profeta, or Vladimir Profeta. He was a Ukrainian priest who then created his own church, quote unquote, and this was served as a front for American intelligence operations, both domestic and abroad. I was there and I witnessed people coming in and out, bizarre individuals. During the Nigerian Civil War, the Biafran Civil War, if anybody listening remembers that, there was an attempt by Biafrans within Nigeria, since Nigeria is in the news these days. The Biafrans wanted to secede from Nigeria, create their own country. Biafra was Catholic. The rest of Nigeria was considered to be Muslim or indigenous religion. The United States was kind of nominally on the side of Biafra. It looked as though, we kind of had to support a Catholic secessionist movement. But my church, the American Orthodox Catholic Church, would have none of that. They were solidly behind the Nigerians themselves. And to that end, the Nigerians sent a man over to be consecrated a bishop in the Bronx. This was in 1968 when I was there. And this man was known as the Holy Prophet Aluya. I remember his name to this day because I was the guy who had to meet him at the airport. Took him from Kennedy Airport to the church. He stayed for a couple of days. He was wearing a dashiki and he had a fly whisk, and there was nothing vaguely Christian or Orthodox about this guy. But he was the Holy Prophet Aluya. And Profeta had no problem consecrating him, making him a bishop, giving him a nice big document to take back, stuck him back on the next plane back to Nigeria. This was a propaganda ploy of some kind. I was too young to really understand all the ramifications at the time. This is what was going on. This is Ukrainians, Russians, Serbian Orthodox. They had their issues because the Croatians were pro-Nazi during the war. And so the Croatians were killing Serbians in their own little internecine conflict. So the Serbians were Orthodox and the Croatians were Catholic and then the Bosnians were Muslim. It was a mess over there, and it was represented in the United States by all these various ethnic movements pushing their own agendas.
Did you have any clue, Peter, at the age of 17? I mean, nothing tipped you off? I understand you can claim innocence because we're all dumb at 17. I get that. I do. And you can defend yourself on that one, and we'll all understand. But did anything smell funny?
Well, sure. I mean, it smelled funny, but this was 1968. I was going to turn 18 that year and go to Vietnam.
Right.
Okay, so my focus was somewhere else. My focus was on saving my ass, quite frankly. And,
right.
This whole FBI, CIA, Holy Prophet, hallelujah, okay, that's weird, okay, for sure. And for a prophet to boast that he had a CIA and an FBI guy on his board of directors of the church, that was bizarre. For a prophet to show me the letter that he got from Dewey.
Yeah.
Because Dewey was running against Truman. He thought he was going to be the White House chaplain. This Ukrainian anti-communist guy running the fake church thought he was going to be the chaplain. He had a letter from Dewey saying that he was.
Did he talk about Hoover too?
He didn't talk to me about Hoover. He talked to me about the FBI. He never mentioned Hoover by name. That information I got later from the other bishops.
Where did they get their money? I mean, they had to pay rent. They didn't have a denomination. They didn't have people contributing to the church, at least not directly in the normal sense. So did that raise a flag for you? Where's the money coming from?
Well, I was very much part of that. Thank you for asking. The situation there with the church is this. Obviously, they were getting financed by someone. There was money flowing into the church. But since there was no congregation, they couldn't prove where the money was coming from. So in order to prove where the money was coming from, to have a method for raising money, they took people like me, 17, 18-year-old, wearing the long black cassocks and the weird hats and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they would send us out to various towns in upstate New York, in Connecticut, and in New Jersey. We would go to a town, small town, get out of the car, and two of us would take one side of the street, of the main street, and two would take the other side of the main street. And we go door to door, knocking on businesses and collecting funds for a non-existent orphanage.
Is there a statute of limitations on this? Are you in the clear today?
Oh, I hope there is.
Okay, so how much money did you collect?
Well, we could collect on a good day, and mind you, this is 1968. We could collect maybe $100, $200 per team, which meant $200 to $400 per day in total, and bring that back. So we're talking about $2,000 a week. In 1968 dollars.
Yeah, that's good dollars in 1968. So even in the Bronx, that would cover the rent and the utilities, certainly.
Well, he had a pretty big operation in the Bronx. He had a rectory and he had a church, the two separate buildings. So he had a large piece of land not very far from the Bronx Zoo, which probably tells you the whole story. But the church building itself was rather elaborate. The interior was all done with Russian icons and all of that, and the Russian icon screen was all done perfectly well. Beautiful little jewel of a church, just that nobody ever attended it. And the rectory was a magnificent building. It was several stories, in the middle of the Bronx, a well-maintained building.
And it was empty.
It was empty, yeah. Just the Archbishop Profeta was the only. Profeta stayed there, and two of his auxiliaries, you might say, a guy called Bishop Hill and a guy called Bishop Christian. Bishop Christian was a Canadian who spoke French and English. He was useful, and Bishop Hill was just kind of an alcoholic. I don't know what his function was, except maybe to answer phones and stuff. So there were three people in that very large house.
Do churches like this exist today? Do you have any evidence of that?
Well, there are a lot of churches that exist today that have their apostolic succession. They have their lineage going back to this particular church. They're all over the country. I don't know how genuine they are or not. I think they're struggling very hard to be genuine because of the bad publicity.
Right.
So I think that's possible. But as far as running operations, black ops, that kind of stuff, well, it was running all through Iran-Contra. We had one of those fake bishops testifying before Congress during Iran-Contra, and we had another one who was arrested by the Italian intelligence authorities during the stuff that was going on in Sarajevo back during the Clinton administration. And he was he was a fake bishop that I knew personally from the old days, and he was running some kind of an operation there.
We're going to run out of time, and I've got two questions that may take some time, and I should have done this earlier. The Vril. the Vril Society, was it real?
Yeah, that's a difficult question.
It is.
I haven't seen real documentation to prove Vril existed. We have the Tula Society. That's enough, and that really did exist. There's a lot of documentation on that. As for the Vril, that might have been more of an imaginary society than a real one.
And imaginary on whose part? Ours or theirs?
Both. I think there were people in Germany who like to think that they belonged to the Vril Society, or maybe they said they belonged to it, but there's really no evidence it really existed that I've been able to find anyway.
Okay, all right. Let's stop there, and I would like to at another time. I want to visit that subject again because
Sure.
it's complex and it's deep.
Yeah.
Whether it existed or not doesn't really change things, is what I mean to say. Okay,
Sure.
Dulles, Alan Dulles.
Yep.
Did he have anything to do directly with the Kennedy assassination?
You really want me to stick my neck out, don't you?
Yes, I do. You're
Thanks
going
a
to
lot.
sleep with one eye open tonight, my brother.
With both of them, man.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, okay, Dulles. Well, indirectly, I think there's no doubt that he did. Whether he did directly or not, I mean, giving the orders to pull the trigger, I don't know. I don't think anybody does. But as far as indirectly, he certainly contributed to that situation. We have the strange situation of E. Howard Hunt on his deathbed basically saying there was a CIA plot to kill Kennedy.
That's right.
If we take that at face value, then obviously Dulles, if not part of that operation, was at least morally responsible. If it was a rogue CIA operation, which is, I suppose is possible, then maybe Dulles did not know about it. But I have a different take on this thing, and it's because of the 9. And I know we've talked about this before, but Dulles had very strong connections back to this particular group. He was only 2 handshakes away from Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's right.
So Dulles knew Mary Bancroft. Mary Bancroft, this woman was his mistress during the OSS days in Europe. She was the best friend of Arthur Young's wife, Ruth Forbes Payne Young. They were best friends, and Ruth Forbes Payne Young, to give her entire name because you kind of have to in this circumstance, was the mother-in-law of Ruth Payne, who lived in Dallas at the time, in whose house Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina Oswald lived and stayed for a while. So we have Alan Dulles to Mary Bancroft to Ruth Young to Ruth Payne to Oswald. I mean, at one point, Ruth Payne flew or drove from Dallas to Philadelphia, where the Youngs lived, Arthur Young and Ruth Young, in just about 2 months before the assassination, when she had Marina Oswald, staying with her, basically. These Russian defectors were staying with her. And she's hanging out during the summer with Arthur Young and Ruth Young, and then goes back to Dallas, and then within months, the president is assassinated.
Wasn't she taking Russian lessons from Oswald's wife?
That was the story, yeah.
Yeah.
I really don't know about that story, but I mean, yeah, she was allegedly taking Russian lessons, yeah.
And didn't Guy Banister rent a room there too? I kid. But with, and I don't want to make light of this because this is very, very serious stuff here. Do you think that Dulles knew in advance? That's the thing. Did he know something in advance and just didn't? That's a conspiracy right there. And if you don't come forward and speak about it, then certainly you're as guilty as whoever pulled the trigger.
Well, he had to know about the threats on Kennedy's life in general, and he had to know about the very specific plot in Florida that was being hatched just weeks before the actual assassination in Dallas. That was known to the Secret Service. It had to have been known to Dulles. I mean, these are things that, of course, Dulles was no longer in the pipeline. He had been fired by Kennedy over Bay of Pigs. So we don't know how much information he was getting. He was not getting anything direct channel. He might have been getting back channel information on this, but putting him on the Warren Commission seems to me the height of obscenity. No matter what we may think about what Dulles knew or didn't know, he had no business being on the Warren Commission except to steer it away from areas that he thought would have been dangerous, as he did during Ruth Payne's testimony.
Yes, he did. He interrupted her every time he had a chance.
Yeah.
What about? Okay, now this is weird, but you've been able to. You know what? If we go back to ISIS all the way to Tacoma, Washington. We now have a complete line of American history completed. But what about Bush? Is Bush now also, and I'm talking about Bush Sr., Herbert, is he complicated into this too as well because of his association with not only with the CIA, but Allen Dulles and JFK, and he's right there in the middle of it too. Is there an issue there?
Well, we all remember that, Oswald knew or had an address for Bush. In his address book, there's this connection between Oswald and the Bush family, especially where Zapata Oil was concerned and Bush's oil interests. People were meeting, oil guys were meeting in Texas all the time, and they were pissed off about Kennedy and for a number of reasons. So, if only ideologically, just on the basis of that alone, Herbert Walker Bush would have been implicated in this to some extent. How much more did he know? I don't know. But Zapata Oil, those sticky fingers are all over this story. We just don't understand how they connect or where they connect. But for sure, that's not the only Bush that was involved with an assassination. We have Neil Bush, who was meeting with John Hinckley's father on the day that Hinckley attempted to kill Ronald Reagan. So we've got Bushes involved in this whole thing, really, in assassinations and all of that. We just don't know to what extent. Is it some sort of weird spiritual, black hole? Is it some kind of strange series of coincidences, the sinister forces that I sometimes talk about? Or can we draw, instead of dotted lines, can we draw solid lines? I really don't know. But the Hinckley thing is very suggestive. It makes you go back and look at the Bushes, Prescott Bush. It makes you look at the Harrimans and the Walkers and their support of the Nazis during World War II, before, during, and after World War II. It makes you look at all of that. It makes you really realize that people who run corporations, who run big financial institutions, they have a completely different set of rules than we do, and a completely different take on reality than we do. They're not thinking in terms of black and white the way we're supposed to think of it, the way our media tells us to think of it.
I didn't open up the phone lines, but Dino called in, so I grabbed it. Dino, say hi to Peter Levenda.
Thank you, Jimmy. Peter, I enjoy how you seem to really quote your sources so we can all check on you. I know it's kind of late in the discussion. It's been fascinating, but what have you come across in your research about, and I won't mention his name, but there's another famous conspiracy speaker who talks about reptilians and reptoids, and their possible, relationship to royal families in Europe, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you know about it.
Sure.
Have you run across any evidence for this? I'll take it off the air. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Dino.
Well, thanks for your comments. One thing I'll have to say is I probably should recuse myself from this answer, because as been pointed out to me, there's been YouTube videos of me by people claiming that I'm a reptilian. Showing strange movements of my hands or voice and claiming that I'm one of the reptilians myself. So how could I answer this question if I'm part of the problem? But no, to tell you, my answer is no. I've not run across any lizards. I don't understand about that really. I've tried to figure out where that comes from. If he was speaking metaphorically or allegorically, and it turns out he's not. He's very serious. So I just can't contribute to that. As being a reptilian myself.
I didn't know that. It makes a lot of sense, though, Peter.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. When you just mentioned, as you were going through the lineage of the Bush family, and you bring up Prescott, I'm going to read tomorrow night on the show. I'll see if I can pull up the file overnight, or I'll certainly email it to you tomorrow. The family tree out of the monarchy out of Great Britain, and the direct to the Bush family, all the way to Prescott. And the name Prescott falls in the family tree going back about 300 years.
Wow.
And when I'll read the family tree backwards to today on tomorrow's show, and I'll email it to you, it'll freak you out. You were talking 2 handshakes away. This is arm in arm.
Wow.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And so, is there any question about that there would be two Bushes in the White House over here. No, that was preordained.
Yeah, it sure looks
time
that
ago.
way.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to thank you, Peter. What are you doing? What are you doing now? Is the Hitler Legacy? Is it available in paperback? Your website, Amazon. What's the best way to get the book?
Yeah, it's not on paperback yet, but it is on Kindle. You can download it from the Amazon site. My own website, peterlevenda.com, has more information about it because there's more research being done, and some readers have been very good about sending me more information as they come across it. I found out connections between things I didn't even know that were actually written in my books I never put together, especially concerning the movement of Sukarno's gold through Indonesia, the Nazi gold and all of that, and some very strange developments. So you can look at the peterlevenda.com website or the Sinister Forces website or Amazon. You can get the Kindle version or the hardcover. It's not in paperback yet.
I actually read your blog on that on your website, or about different connections in the book that you weren't aware of.
Yeah.
And pretty interesting reading. So, yeah, peterlevenda.com. And I'm going to let you go with one last question. How many address books do you have?
Well, let me see. I've got one address book that I'm not supposed to talk about. I don't have the whole address book, about half, about a Nazi who died in Indonesia some time ago. I have, of course, Rudel's address book, Lee Harvey Oswald's address book, Clay Shaw's address book. I don't know. That might be all.
Well, that's enough.
Yeah.
That is scary reading. I got to, do you actually, are you able to, well, it's one thing you can use it for research, but do you actually, you've done it with Rudel, do you go through these address books and chase people down and
oh, yeah, sure.
and utilize it and make phone calls?
Absolutely. If there's any chance at all that these addresses or phone numbers or people are still alive, then I go after it because it's part of the story. No one else is doing it. No one else went through Hans Ulrich Rudel's address book. Believe me, it was written in German hand, very spidery, and these were like photocopied pages, so that was very difficult to make out. But eventually I was able to identify, I would say, 98% of the names in that address book and hunt them down. So it's worthwhile. What you come up with is incredible.
One of the things that I want to bring you back on and talk about at a later date, were you able to connect the dots in any way? I keep saying that with you, but that's just what you do. To 9/11, is there any connections, subtle or direct?
There are connections, of course. I mean, my feeling is that 9/11 was blowback for everything else that had gone on before. All the stuff that we had done, weaponizing religion as being one of these issues. But also the fact that most of the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia is a whole other story. And I guess we don't really have time for it here. But yeah, I've drawn some connections there, and we could talk about it later if you like. It's an interesting story. 9/11 is very contentious, as you know. It's very controversial. I've stayed away from 9/11 commentary for the most part. There's a lot of people involved in it. But I still really would like to know how Tower 7 went down. That's one of those things that bothers me to this day.
Yeah, it does to me too. I watched a hotel come down in Las Vegas, right? A controlled demolition. Mm-hmm. And and when you see it in person, when you see something like that come down, you understand what's involved. And then you look at 7 come down. That is they just don't fall. That's it. They just don't fall down. There is something that a lot of something is involved. It is not just a simple thing you go up and lean against the building and it falls over. That's not the case. And like I said, once you see a building come down and what is involved, 7 is a big mystery to me. Well, it certainly wasn't caused from airplane debris. You can rest assured.
No, it can't be. Come on. Let's be reasonable. And, as far as personal connections, where I lived in Kuala Lumpur was only a few blocks away from where the 9/11 plot was initially hatched, by the way, as we only found out later when the 9/11 Commission report was published. But the first, before Germany, before the whole thing in Hanover and all of that, or Hamburg, it started really in Malaysia with some of the terror groups there and Al-Qaeda meeting with people there. So if it really was a plot and it really was an Al-Qaeda plot, I was only a few blocks away when it happened.
Thank you so much, Peter. Always great conversation with you on and off the air. Thank you so much for hanging Oh, another 25 minutes tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have
Thank
a great.
you, Jimmy.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Peter Levenda, everybody, went to the bloody end tonight. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, we're going to have a very special Fader night. Thursday night, don't forget, Michael Tellinger will be joining us. That's why Fade to Black exists, is conversations like tonight with the one and only Peter Levenda. Thank you, Peter. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Kamarian. Shows produced by Hilton J. Palm, Mark D. Cover, LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Very special thanks to Mark Dunbar. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Viteau, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady Bidell. Webmaster is Method of Signaling. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro by Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Go check him out. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Very special thanks to KGRA, The Planet. Tomorrow night, Fader Nights, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you, Peter Levenda. Everybody be safe. See ya.